Thank you for being here today. The event will commence in a bit. Just a few house rules before we begin. This event has an age restriction of 16 and above. All the audience must respect the Malaysian races and religion. Any form of disrespect or threatening elements are strictly prohibited. The conduct of this talk today is an interactive session. We would highly encourage you to be as interactive and engaging as possible. Each module will be accompanied by a Q&A session towards the end. The speaker will then engage with you by answering some of your questions. So keep the scarce heads coming. We would like to add a trigger warning that this talk will merely highlight sensitive social issues and does not, by any means, promoting or engaging any sort of harassment or sexual activities. Thank you. The event will begin shortly.
Hello, good evening, and salam Malaysia. I am Abiha, one of your MC, all the way from Bahrain today. I hope everyone's having a good day and everyone's doing well. Now, guys, don't forget to keep yourself in positive vibes but negative on that COVID test.
Hi everyone, I'm Danya. Today I'll be accompanied by Abiha, and we will be moderating the Time to Talk Unveiling the Taboo of Sex Education 2020. Before we jump in, I'd like to go over a few items so you would know how to participate in today's event. This talk is recorded and you can later access through our Facebook page, Time to Talk. Feel free to leave your thoughts, reaction, and questions during the module session. Make sure the comment section is hyped up. As a recap, let me go through the house rules once more. This event has an age restriction of 16 and above. All the audience must respect the Malaysian races and religion. Any form of disrespect and threatening elements are strictly prohibited. The conduct of this talk today is an interactive session. I would encourage everyone to be interactive and engaging with both the audiences and the speakers. Each module will be accompanied by a Q&A session towards the end. The speaker will then engage with you by answering some of your questions, so keep those curious heads coming. I would like to add a trigger warning that this talk will merely highlight sensitive social issues and does not by any means promoting or encouraging any sort of harassment or sexual activities. So, Abiha, mind explaining to us what today's event is going to be about?
Right. So our focus today is basically on the shadows of the taboos of sex education in Malaysia. Now, as we all know, like this is a global ongoing issue, and the current state of sex education in Malaysia is in dire straits as moral issues such as unwanted pregnancies, rape cases, and STDs arises from day to day. So this talk today aims to raise awareness on not only sexual, but also reproductive health issues that impact the youth, and to educate the society and its youngsters on issues related to sexual violence and child marriage and child violation. So I expect everyone today to keep an open mind as you enjoy each part of this event today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Time to Talk, Unveiling the Taboo of Sex Education 2020. Thank you.
With us today, our program manager, Jesika Zamzuri, to deliver the opening remarks. Let's invite her in.
Hello and good evening to our officiator. Young Berhomat Syed, representative of IUMW, Ms. Hasni Haldi, respected panel speakers and moderators, and to every single one of you here. Thank you so much for choosing your time to spend your evening with us. Earlier this year, when I thought about what project to work on, sex education did not come to mind. Why would I put myself through all the trouble just to be in the hot seat for people to judge not only me, but my team? Even among my friends, the mere mention of the word sex makes them squirm. It is as if it's haram for the word sex and education to sit next to each other. At that realization, it is what made us start this project. The goal which we had was to transform the current conservative thinking into a more progressive mindset. The prevailing view is that sex education is bad because it encourages sex. And if we continue to avoid the topic, then people will not have sex. But this definitely does not explain the increasing number of unwanted teen pregnancies, child marriages, sexual harassment, date, and marital rape cases that have been happening everywhere, even in Malaysia. If everything can be solved by education, then why not this? Thus, I would like to take this opportunity to give a huge shout out to all of my 19 committee members who have stayed up until 4 a.m. yesterday to rehearse for this event. And by the way, we are all just students from International University of Malaya, Wales, with the goal of making a change in the society. And I am so proud of all of my team members for managing to organize such an event. Finally, the team and I would like to extend our utmost gratitude to all of our partners, the Noyer Project, Malaysian Urgent Care Clinic, Sukarelawan Society, All Women's Action Society, AWAM, International University of Malaya, Wales, and our amazing sponsor, Landasan Lumayan and Area 27, all of which have helped us make this project a reality. With that, I hope all of you are as excited as I am for what our wonderful speakers, moderators, and even performances have in store for us. That would be all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Without any further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Hasni Haldi, IUMW representative, to convey her speech.
Yang Berhormat Tuan Syed Saddiq Abdul Rahman, Member of Parliament from Muar, currently the youngest MP ever elected in Malaysia and also a youth icon. Our distinguished speakers and panelists, we have an impressive lineup of extraordinary people with multiple backgrounds, from celebrities, activists, advocates, medical specialists, journalists to social media influencers. Our program manager, Jesika, and the organizing team of Time to Talk, respected guests, participants, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good evening to everyone. First and foremost, I was asked to cut down my speech to 3 minutes. I will try to do that. Welcome to the third series of Time to Talk, an annual event organized and led by students of the International University of Malaya, Wales, IUMW. I believe some of you, maybe most of you, may not heard of this university before. So please allow me to introduce our university a bit. IUMW is a private university jointly owned by University of Malaya and University of Wales, UK. It was established in 2013 and has over 1,800 students, offering a wide range of programs from foundation way up to PhD level. It offers its own homegrown degree and also undifferentiated degree from UWTSD under the Dual Award program. Now, back to our event today. Time to Talk is a student-led event held annually, and this year the theme is Unveiling the Taboo of Sex Education. Now, the topic of sex education has always been treated as an off-limit topic within the Malaysian society. Sadly, this approach has not been helpful in curbing the various social and health issues brought about by the misconception on sex education, even the lack of it within our community. The discussion which is about to happen today is an effort from our students to highlight the issue and to encourage more intellectual and academic discourse on the subject. We hope to bring about an awareness among our youth and children on the misconception of sex education. On behalf of the university, I would like to express my humble gratitude to our guests of honor and our distinguished speakers for accepting this invitation to be with us today. Your presence here today means so much to our students, and I can't thank you enough for this. I would also like to congratulate the team for their hard work and dedication in organizing this event. Along came COVID-19, but it did not dampen the spirit, and like a true millennial, they adapted to technology naturally like duck to water and seamlessly converted the event into a virtual struggle. Congratulations, team. You did a very good job. I wish to also thank their parents and family, of whom I was told have been supporting the team in many ways, directly and indirectly. And also a note of thanks to our generous sponsors who made this all possible. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all your support. With that, I pass the floor, or rather the screen, back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hasni. I hope you're having a lovely day. Right, all right. Now, time to talk. We'd like to thank YB Saddiq Syed Abdurrahman for his few welcoming words as an officiator of our event. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us today. However, YB Saddiq, he was thoughtful enough to record a few words. Let's get to the video.
Assalamualaikum tachahau, yapidiyarkinge vanakkam. To my fellow Malaysians, thank you very much for spending your time to attend the virtual session on TimeToTalk 2020. As we talk about the need to have an intellectual and engaging discourse on sexual education, I think especially today, it's much needed. More Malaysians must speak freely about it, and we need to educate fellow Malaysians, regardless of race and religion, on the need to understand in depth about sex education. The more we treat sex education as a taboo, the more problems will plague our society. A lot of us do not know, but every 3 days there will be one life loss because of baby dumping. And not just that, as we speak, I think the last number is about 2018, there's almost 100,000 Malaysians affected by HIV and AIDS. The lack of education, awareness, exposure will lead to worse outcomes, and therefore it is our moral duty as fellow Malaysians to educate, to create greater awareness on sexual education, to not be afraid to talk about it, especially when talking about it leads to greater awareness and accountability, and hopefully create a hospitable environment where those affected can come up to speak freely about it, but most importantly, those affected can seek for help, whether through formal or informal institutions which exist in Malaysia. The less we speak about it, the more we treat it as a taboo, the greater problems Malaysia will face. Change starts with us. Society daring to speak about it, showing empathy and compassion to deal with it, to ensure that we show compassionate leadership in dealing with these sorts of problems. It is our duty as fellow Malaysians. I wish you all the best, and for those who will attend this conference, I hope that you will learn as much as possible and become the bastions of change. And with that, I, Saddiq bin Syed Abdurrahman, officiate TimeToTalk 2020. Take care and enjoy, everyone.
Sex education continues to be a touchy subject not just in Malaysia, but many parts of the world.
Women, Family and Community Development Minister Datuk Sri Dr. Wan Aziza Wan Ismail said more than 1,000 babies have been dumped since 2010. The figure was from 2010 to May 2019, and 64% of which were babies who were found dead.
You have probably heard of it by now. The horror story that is the V2K Telegram group, home to over 30,000 people who use it to share pictures and videos of Malaysian women without their consent. And to make things worse, some of the content is pornographic in nature.
I was sexually harassed by a senior lecturer of in his department office.
Violence against women happens when men believe, or it could be a woman as well, a person believes they have authority or power over another human being.
Kes rogol adalah merupakan kategori kes paling tinggi berlaku terhadap kanak-kanak yang dilaporkan kepada PDRM.
Of expressing disgust towards the pervert, there were several netizens who actually blamed the victim.
Dia dapat apa jadi bagi saya minum saja. Tapi bila saya sedar, saya dapat tahu saya sudah dirogol.
He groomed her. He groomed her for about a month. She's at that stage where that's when you start exploring these kind of things.
How sexual crimes in a holistic and comprehensive manner will be tabled in the current session of Parliament.
Yang Ketua, saya mohon cadangkan iaitu bahawa orang undang-undang kesalahan seksual terhadap kanak-kanak 2017 bacakan kali ini. Kesalahan seksual terhadap kanak-kanak 2017.
Ramai 1/3 wanita dan 1 daripada 6 lelaki di Malaysia mengalami gangguan seksual. Bahawa terdapat kelemahan yang serius dalam undang-undang sedia ada bagi menangani gangguan seksual.
Tetapi kita juga ingin memastikan bahawa penyaluran maklumat itu adil dan anak muda di seluruh Malaysia bebas menyuarakan pendapat mereka.
Okay, that was great. That was very, very touching. Thank you, YB Syed Saddiq, for taking out the time and putting some words out for us and officiating this event. Okay, so our first module today is going to be recognizing toxic relationships. So, toxic relationships, right? Toxic relationships are like poison. I use the word poison because people understand it. I believe it's absolutely vital to pay attention to deal breakers about your potential partners. So I'm bringing this up with Diana Sabri, a 21-year-old full-time student who's currently working on a platform where she can promote self-love and productivity for young women. Her priorities include her family, friends, and her relationships. Hi, Diana. Good to see you. How's it going?
Hi, Abiha. How are you?
I'm good. Pleasure to have you today.
It's an honor to be here today. Thank you so much. Time to talk.
You're welcome. All right. So next up, we have Senja.je, an independent broadcast journalist and a gender activist. Temina hosts and produces Tea with Temina, which is basically an online talk show that highlights Malaysian women's lived realities, focusing on all things women, society, and commerce. Good evening, Temina. Good to have you. Good to have you on board. How are you doing? How's it going?
Really good, Abiha. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to Time to Talk official. Hey, Diana. Good to see you as well.
Nice to see you.
Absolutely. Really glad to be here. And, honestly, I thought that was a really fantastic introduction by both YB Syed Saddiq and the intro video, because it really helps us to frame why it's so urgent to talk about this right now. Diana, I think you're going first, right? To get started with.
Okay, so hi everyone, greetings. If you guys haven't known, my name is Diana, and today I'll be sharing about toxic relationship. Before I start, I like to say that all of my input today are all based on my own reading and experiences being in a toxic relationship myself in the past year. So when I say the word toxic, what comes in your head firstly? Because according to Dr. Lillian Glass, toxic relationship happens between two people that actually bring more harm towards each other than actual benefits. And it's a lot harder to recognize a toxic relationship, especially in the beginning of the relationship where it gets all butterflies, happy moments, excitement. But as you know, as time passes by, it gets more intense. And this is when the toxic comes in. If I was given more time, I would love to explain each of the term with you guys. But as for now, I can explain that with a toxic person in a toxic relationship, communication gets extremely difficult. And this is because they will gaslight you, they will manipulate you, they will blame you. And what I mean by gaslighting is when that person makes you feel like you should be responsible for your own feelings. And if you are unlucky, they will make you feel like you are insane, you are crazy for feeling whatever that you're feeling right now. And a toxic person is always excessively controlling. I call it a person who cuts another person's wings. And this is because he or she will cut you from gaining good things for yourself, from getting the job you have always wanted to get, from gaining education, the access to proper education. They don't want to see you do good. And in a toxic relationship, your needs are always being neglected. I remember back in my past relationship, I told my partner all the things that I needed. And I was aware that all I wanted was just simple reassurances. I was not speaking of financial aid. I was not speaking of unrealistic things. But he stood in front of my eye and said, you know what, Diana, I think that was too much to ask for. And with a toxic person, they will always make you feel like you're asking for too much. And this is what you guys have to always put in mind. If you see these signs, it's actually the time for you to walk away. And this is when the constant anger and abuse comes in. And now that we have recognized the signs, how will these signs actually impact you as a person? Personally, a toxic relationship made me toxic myself. I was very scared. I was having trust issues. I was abusive myself. I was getting more angry, and it was stopping my personal growth. And this is when it affects my mental health, my sleep, my focus level, and it also destroyed the idea that a healthy relationship actually exists. And Alhamdulillah, years have passed by. I'm at a better place right now. So if I can be at a better place, I will tell you guys that it's actually possible to heal and detox yourself from a toxic relationship. And the things that you can do for yourself is actually, first of all, leave the relationship first. And second of all, it's okay for you to take your time, be on your own, heal, feel whatever that you need to feel, validate your own feelings. And the most important thing for you to do is to cut contact. You don't have to speak to him anymore. You don't have to follow him or her. You don't need to have their number on your phone anymore, because a toxic person will always find ways to manipulate you and to access to you. And this is when you need to exclude yourself from this situation. And if it gets worse, I would suggest you to get help, get proper help. If you see that you're losing more of yourself each day, go and see a therapist, a psychiatrist, share with your family and friends whatever that you're going through. And the best thing that you can do for yourself is actually find yourself again, develop a new hobby, go get the job that you have always wanted to get on. You should meet new people. And if you're lucky, you will find someone else that is a lot better, sane, healthy, not toxic. So I'm happy to be where I am today with a person who encourages me to speak to you guys and share my story with all of you now. I think he's watching it right now. So if I can be here, you can too. And I think Temina will actually explain more about abuse. So I think I'll pass to her now. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Diana. That was really great. And I just wanted to start out by saying thank you to Time to Talk for creating the safe space for unveiling the taboo of sex education. I mean, it's really apt that we're here to discuss such an essential topic under this umbrella, recognizing toxic relationships, especially because of the year that 2020 has been. I'm going to go actually a lot deeper into the kind of social programming and conditioning that actually results in toxic relationships occurring. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has, of course, hit us all hard globally. Meanwhile, there's the shadow pandemic of domestic violence and online gender-based violence, which has also seen an equally alarming rise, both of which are often manifestations of toxic relationships. So, in fact, of course, within the first week of our MCOs in Malaysia, we began hearing from women's organizations about concerns related to gender-based violence or GBV, calls to domestic violence hotlines. They went quiet, but everyone knew that this was not something to celebrate. Now, violence is, of course, most likely still occurring, even though there were no calls, but women and girls were cut off from their normal communication channels, like trusted friends, family members, community organizations, making all this safe communications difficult. So once WhatsApp, Facebook messaging services were quickly started, the calls started to increase again. Women's Aid Organization, for example, reported a 44% increase in calls within the first month of the lockdown. Data from KPWKM, our Women, Family and Community Development Ministry, showed that there were 81 reported cases of domestic violence from March 18 to 31st, while from May 1st to 31st, there were 420 cases reported. So this steady incline is hugely worrying. The viral V2K Telegram group expose that was made up of almost close to 40,000 Malaysian men still in existence, even after this issue gained traction way back on 1st of October 2020. This, of course, entailed young women's pictures used without their permission, which is NCII, or non-consensual sharing of intimate images. This is actually punishable by law, mind you, but in many cases, these images were leaked by men they trusted. Once again, a symptom of toxic relationships. Now, all of this data, these statistics are actually really essential for framing just how deep this rabbit hole of toxic relationships can become. Domestic violence and online GBV are just like the perfect maelstrom for abuses against women and girls who are made vulnerable. I'm really glad that Diana covered anger and abuse, as these are key areas to look out for. Now, before going deeper, I want to frame just why we're so susceptible to toxic relationships, particularly women, due to the nature of patriarchal attitudes and gendered stereotypes that dominate heteronormative relationships. So, plenty of toxic relationship habits are sort of hardwired into us to such an extent in our culture that we end up accepting them as normal. At the end of the spectrum of toxic relationships, you have huge alarm bells, but plenty of things that are just in between are highly problematic too. I mean, think of it this way. There's no class in high school or university on how to be a responsible boyfriend or girlfriend, right? And without internationally recognized academic modules for CSC and SRHR in our schools, in our primary schools, which also teach you healthy boundaries, building respectful interpersonal relationships and bodily autonomy. We don't have any of that in our school system yet, right? So combine this with a lack of frank guidance often from adults. So we resort to trial and error. And if you're like most people, it's mostly error, right? So this opens the door for a string of toxic relationships as we fumble through an already complex dating world out there. Men and women are also encouraged to objectify each other and to objectify their romantic relationships. What I mean by this is, okay, think of public celebrity proposals like what happened last night to Ukasha Senrose. Things like that become normalized as the romantic ideal when there's clear shades of toxicity that come hand in hand with pressuring one's partner for a public answer to a proposal. Let's cycle it back, go back to even 2016 at the Rio Olympics, and I'll never forget this. Chinese diver Hazy, she had just won a silver medal for her event, and her boyfriend proposed to her while she was receiving her medal. I mean, that's just an abominable level of male entitlement. It's a control mechanism, a way of saying, hey, you may have just won an Olympic medal, but really the most important thing is that you say yes to being my wife right here, right now. So, I hope that's a little illustrated of the types of romantic norms we actually internalize about toxic relationships as we grow into adults. So, going into a couple of other warning signs that you can look out for in a partner's behavior. This can include intensity, OTT gestures, yeah? Like insisting on wanting to meet your family, your closest friends, even if you've not really been going out, and then brushing that off and saying, hey, I'm just an enthusiastic partner. Why don't you want all this attention? But if it sets off your warning bells, if you've got that gut feeling, listen to your gut. Then there's also, yes.
When that happens, they will eventually manipulate you, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like that's just a form of manipulation.
Absolutely. It's a form of manipulation. And then, Diana, it goes a little bit deeper into other forms of warning signs in toxic relationships, such as gaslighting, constant criticism, and then making you believe that you're actually the wrong party for having called it out, right? So it's a cycle.
It makes you feel like you are the crazy one for feeling whatever that you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is actually something that many years on, of course, I noticed not only in the toxic relationships that I was in, Diana, but also friends, both female as well as male, who I've helped and who have formed moral support. Isolation. Isolation is a huge tactic that is actually used by abusers and partners in toxic relationships, which basically means they start to limit the time that you spend with your friends and your family to make you more dependent on them while maintaining their own support system and circle of friends.
Yes.
So eventually your circle becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until you would quite literally be physically and emotionally cut off from who are closest to you. So yeah, it's a cycle. It's a cycle. And it moves into blame, there's anger, there's sabotage, there's even things such as staying on the phone all night with you, just so that, you would be not at your best in the morning, maybe not able to get up for work or go to classes, miss important appointments. It can take all forms of really, really insidious sabotage. It doesn't have to be outright physical violence that forms the basis of a toxic relationship, but many of these microaggressions and behaviors that build up over time are also definitely toxic. Yeah. So when it comes down to it, I think healthy relationships, though, they have 3 ingredients, which are respect, trust, and affection. And when we sub out and say, okay, love is the most important of them all, that actually puts us in a vulnerable position, which makes you liable to subbing out everything else as long as you're loved. So let's say if you prioritize love over the respect you're given, you'll tolerate being treated like a doormat. If you prioritize love over trust in a relationship, you'll tolerate lying, you'll tolerate infidelity. So, I think it brings us to the question, why do we tolerate bad relationships? I mean, to be honest, I think it's for all sorts of reasons. It may be low self-esteem, maybe a lack of self-awareness, but actually, when it comes down to it, I think it's about this. All sorts of people can end up in a scenario where they are in a toxic relationship. Like the recent news about musician FKA Twigs, who revealed she was in an abusive relationship with actor Shia LaBeouf. She filed a lawsuit against him for sexual battery, assault, and infliction of emotional distress. This brings us to the point, and this was what FKA said in her own statement, that she is an intelligent young woman, but at the same time, she was rationalizing her choices, and that's what took her so long to actually come out of this toxic relationship. True. So I think it brings up some great points. It doesn't matter how smart you are, emotionally intelligent and intellectually intelligent people do get into abusive relationships. It happens, yeah. Diana, do you have any thoughts moving along about abusive relationships, particularly when it comes to how people react once you're out of the relationship? I think there's a lot of judgment that surrounds people, not only when they're in the toxic relationship, but once they leave it, the aftermath.
I feel like the most difficult part is when people don't listen to both parties. So they just listen to one party. So maybe you were being the one, you were the victim of it. You were being manipulated. You were being abused. But when they hear just from your abusive partner, you could be at fault because they're always manipulating it, even after you have getting out of the relationship. I think it was so difficult for me to stand up for myself. But at the end of the day, I believe that I own no answer for anybody. And if I'm happy to get out of it, and nobody should actually say anything.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is the hardest part. It's how people look at it. You can be at fault, although you were the one getting abused. You were the one getting manipulated.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that is very difficult.
And I think it's also that a lot of the judgment prevents people, particularly women, who often shoulder the burden of society's expectations to make a relationship go smoothly, be it marriage or even a long-term relationship. So you feel embarrassed. You feel like you're the one who messed up if you're the one who ends the relationship. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think just being a smart person, it doesn't mean you wouldn't necessarily get into a toxic scenario. Yeah.
Personally, Tamina, would you stay friends with a partner who has eventually abused you in the past? Would you cut contacts or would you stay friends? What do you think?
You know what? When you were saying what you were saying earlier, I want to start clapping because that is a lesson that is very, very hard learned. And I think you're spot on already. Do not remain friends with somebody who has exposed you to not just a toxic scenario, but has conducted themselves in a toxic manner. I think there are far too many people in the world who you can get to know as friends, as your circle, that you don't need to keep in contact with someone who's violated that human trust. Yeah, absolutely. I don't believe you need to be giving second chances when it comes to mending toxicity, because it's not your fault. It's on them. Yeah. I think another thing that I wanted to just touch upon is the fact that a lot of people, women especially, say, if anyone laid a hand on me, I just leave. I'd be, smart enough to see the signs, particularly when it comes to physical abuse and toxic relationships. But from all the reading that I've done and all the research that is out there, the truth is that by the time it gets to physical abuse, people are often already conditioned to accept the abuse.
Yes.
Which is how it ends up in a scenario where sometimes it takes years and years to actually come out of the relationship.
Yeah, I call it a trauma bond,
Absolutely. Perfectly put. It's trauma bond. And trauma bonds are intoxicatingly addictive. It sets off a hormone cycle in your brain chemistry.
Speaking of experience, I can very much agree with you.
Absolutely. And that just puts you in a cycle of repetition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that was very well said, ladies. I'm honestly amazed. I'm sure we're all learning a lot. Right. So we can bring in some questions from the audience today, I'm sure. Okay. First question from Mooney Ho. What if I am the toxic person in the relationship? Then how do I confirm that statement? Pretty sure you can interpret that.
Wow. Okay.
You can take this question.
Yeah, sure. I'll go for it. Thank you, ladies. And Muni, I think you're asking that question in the first place. Am I the toxic person in the relationship? Shows that you are at least at a space where you're willing to have an open mind for listening, critical reflection, and committing to action. I think then you need to go back to what the ground rules of healthy relationships are. Ask yourself, do I respect, trust, and provide affection to my partner? And do my actions reflect this? If they don't, I think you can start breaking it down and seeing whether or not your behavior is actually projecting toxicity. Yeah.
Can I add, Tamina?
Yeah,
well,
sure.
if Moni, you can also speak to your partner, since communication is also very important in the relationship. You can ask your partner, do you find me toxic? And what is it that you think that I need to work on? Which part where I'm lacking? I think other than the suggestion that Tamina suggested you, I think communicating with your partner will get you your answer. Thank you.
I think we can have another question. Okay. Lily says, tell us what will be the healthy boundaries for a good or a toxic relationship?
Yeah, take this, Diana.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much. So basically, I think in a healthy relationship, you're allowed to have your own space, your own time. You are allowed to speak up. You are allowed to gain your knowledge. You're allowed to work. In a healthy relationship, you are allowed to make decisions together. You don't have to make a decision based on someone's convenience. So, meanwhile, in a toxic relationship, it's always more about how that person wants it to work. Rather than it be about you, it's about them. Am I right, Tamina? What can you add?
Absolutely. I think it's really apt to say that, you need healthy boundaries, which means that going back to something that both of us had just mentioned earlier, be very wary about what kind of support system you have before the relationship and during the relationship. If it's an unhealthy relationship with lots of blurred boundaries, you will likely find that your support network, your closest friends, your family members, etc., those are the ones who are slowly fading away into the background. Now, all those are like, flashing big red warning signs. So take it all into consideration, into the fact that a relationship is made up of two separate individuals coming together to bring out the best in each other, not to completely subsume one person for the benefit of the other. It has to be an equitable partnership. Yeah.
Okay, that was great. Perhaps another question.
Okay.
Okay. No, I think I'm gonna wrap up the session. Right?
Sure.
All right. So that was really great, insightful. We are so happy that both of you were here with us today, and it was a pleasure talking to the both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abiha. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, guys. So we will be having a short 15 minutes break. So get comfy and get right back with us with your coffees or tea, whatever your preference is, because the next half of the event is going to be a very exciting one. So see you in a bit. Hello. Hello, hello. We're back from the short break. I hope everyone's still here with me. Please feel free to key in your opinion or anything that you're curious about, whether you're logging in through Facebook or YouTube. So, shall we roll back in? Right. So, our next and the first forum session for this event is on child grooming. So unfortunately, in Malaysia, police has recorded a devastating number of 1,721 sexual crime cases involving children in the first half of 2020. Underage sex, even with consent, is statutory rape. If you are below 16, you are a minor. So I'm bringing this up with Daphne Eiking. Daphne is an award-winning actress, a pioneer host for TLC Say Yes to the Dress Asia, and a dedicated child rights activist in raising awareness on children's rights violations in Malaysia. Her determination really is what brought her to being appointed to form the Women's Advisory and Consultative Council by the Women, Family, and Community Development Ministry that strongly campaigns for members of the parliament from both sides to agree on passing the Sexual Offences Against Children Act 2017. Hi, Daphne. Good evening. Good to have you. How are you? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm a bit tired, but I'm all pumped up for this session. Thank you, Abiha.
Daphne, I think you're on mute.
I'm on mute? Oh, really? And I was there saying, hold on. Give me a while.
Could you unmute yourself?
No, we're good. Oh, dear. Can you hear me now?
Next up, we have Clarissa Say, live with us all the way from Australia. Clarissa is a former rape journalist who has covered topics on child sexual grooming, bullying in schools, and race-based issues. She is currently pursuing a degree in psychology after speaking to multiple victims of rape and sexual assault to learn more about the long-term psychological effects of trauma and paths to recovery. Hi, Clarissa. Good to have you today.
Abiha.
Good to see you.
Hi, Daphne. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes. Clarissa, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. All right. Thank God. Okay.
All right. Next up, I'm going to bring Thensi, a co-conspirator at Speaks. Speaks is an organization that focuses on creating safer spaces for children and young people to truly be themselves, free from any fear and harm. So, ladies, thank you all for making time today. And all right, Daphne, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much, Abiha, and thank you, everyone. Hi, Clarissa. Hi, Thensi. Let's just dive right to it since introductions have been made. Perhaps you can start off with Thensi. What exactly is child grooming and how does it happen?
Well, simply put, it's a process, a gradual process where someone who has intentions to, can you hear me?
You're a little bit echoey.
Echoey? Uh-oh. Is it clearer now?
But you're on earphones, right? You got
Yes,
your
I
earphones
am.
on? Yeah, okay, it's fine.
Okay. So basically, it's a gradual process where someone who has intentions to sexually abuse a child gains the trust of the child's support system, the family, perhaps the people in the environment, so that they can wear away the boundaries of this child, so that eventually they will go towards sexual abuse of the child. I think it's important to know that this can happen, over a period of weeks, 2 weeks, some months, years. And it doesn't always start with sexual behaviors. It starts with very casual behaviors that may not even alert you to what the perpetrator is actually trying to do. Yeah. Any problem with the sound?
It's a bit scratchy, but that's fine. It's okay. Well, we can hear you. It's just slightly echoey and Clarissa, when Rage did a documentary Predator in My Phone, I think it was about 3 to 4 years ago, it started out merely to do a story on date, rape, drugs. And it was then that the team realized that sexual grooming was not covered by law here in Malaysia. Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. So this just goes to show how you can come up with an angle and then do your research, but then the story turns out to be an entirely different thing. So we went to the police initially and we wanted the statistics on date rape drugs, and then they just gave us all the statistics they had for modus operandi on what would eventually lead to underage sexual assault and rape. And we found out that that social media chat apps just kept showing up again and again and again. So like WhatsApp, BeeTalk, WeChat, and it amounted to about like 80% of the total modus operandi. So we were like, oh, that's kind of strange. And then so we set up an account, pretended to be a 15-year-old, and what would you know, before like 30 minutes was up, almost 30 men in total had messaged us because we were using the See People Nearby function. We set up a sting, we went up and met with these people. Well, I met up with those people. I was 19 and I pretended to be 15, but I guess people see what they want to see because they bought it. And when we eventually took all this evidence that we had, brought it to the police, they were like, well, was there an offense taken place? Had they touched you? We were like, well, no. Had they raped you? No. And you're not really 15, right? No. And so that, as it turned out, was not covered under protective legislation, which is what led to us really late in the game, because you started in 1995 and Tensi was working on women's rights in 2005, and we only just found out, oh wow, we don't have child grooming laws.
And you think you just assume, I assumed it was there until I was on board, and Ian and the rest of the team said, come on, let's campaign for this. And you know what was painful? When we were trying to lobby for MPs to ensure that they signed the bill, which they did, thank God, it became a political thing where we had to campaign and lobby. In my head, like, surely you don't need to lobby this. And it's interesting what you said about how you pretended to be a 15-year-old. I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and she's lovely, she's sweet and all this. But then this mother who thought that her daughter is all well protected, father is very strict, I found some very disturbing pictures on my 13-year-old daughter's phone, which included a dick pics. So what's a dick pics? It's basically a picture of a penis. And my heart just stopped. Okay. And I was so afraid to tell the father, because obviously the father's more strict, right? And then I went through and I was shaking, because here's the mother trying to advocate all these things. And then you see your daughter having all these pictures. So I didn't know which was more shocking. The fact that she was receiving these sort of messages, or the fact that she had been able to answer some of the messages. Like one of them, she answered, ew, my brother's penis is bigger than yours, bye. So she was able to, I don't know. So,
like it was very passe.
Very passe, but like, okay, I think she can handle, So I showed it to the dad, and the dad was saying like, a bit shocked also. Then see, what makes a child vulnerable to grooming? I'm very worried about this now that my girl is a teen.
I think one of the major things that makes all children vulnerable is the lack of information. Lack of information about their body, lack of information about their sexuality, lack of information that they can actually say no, or they can turn to their parents. So what I mean by that, so for example, as adults, when we talk to our children and all that, sometimes we unintentionally say things that give them mixed messages.
Oh dear,
so
like what?
So your body belongs to you. Mm-hmm. Then you go and you meet your family and you say, no, I don't want to hug auntie. Don't be rude, go hug auntie.
Pergi salam kat dia. Salam, jangan tak salam.
Exactly. So what we do there unintentionally for the most is that we take away children's capacity and ability to trust their instincts, right? With the grooming process, at some point the child might feel like, oh wait, something's not right. But if you go back to how a person grooms a child, they actually even do it in front of the parents, in front of the family members and stuff. Which means they normalize certain behaviors, and children can think like, oh, if mommy and daddy are okay with this, then I guess this is okay. And coupled with the idea that we take away their capacity to trust their instincts, then it becomes very confusing for them. The other thing is also, another thing that makes children really vulnerable is when you put them into boxes. Good child, naughty child, bad child, noisy child, this child, that child. And what
Sweet
happens
child.
when so child, I think I always tell myself, child before anything. Child before any kind of identity or markers you want to put on them. Child first. Because what it does, it takes away our abilities as adults to be able to see when something is going wrong, because we might just rush them.
And who does a perpetrator groom? Is it just the child, or how does it work? Or
Well, they likely target the child first, right? But then they will also work with the adults around them. Clarissa, you might know a little bit more about this, I'm not sure. But like in the case of Richard Huckle, a lot of people might be familiar with Huckle's case, right? He engaged with the children, but he also engaged with the community, church groups, the community, the lives of the children, bringing them out to parks and things like teaching them language, all kinds of things. So in this sense, he actually kind of groomed the entire community because he was someone that they trusted. He was someone that they allowed. So in terms of grooming, it's basically the entire support system, because what it does is it makes it really difficult for the child to speak up, because this is someone that everyone likes.
respects. Yeah.
Everyone respects.
Clarissa, do you have anything else to add on to that?
Oh, no, I think Nancy encapsulated it perfectly. It's usually not the child alone. They have a persona to maintain and upkeep, and that's what makes it really difficult, because the child's also not just trusting them, they're also looking at the people that they trusting them as well, and that's just, it messes with one's head.
And you're right about how it messes with your head, because I deal with a lot of cases like this. I get a little bit paranoid, but then we've got well-meaning folks out there, you know what I mean? And we have to be respectful. I like the fact that Watenzi says your body is your own, respect it, but then there we are pushing our kids like, pergi salam uncle tu, pergi salam makcik, pergi salam, that's your oppa, that's your ato, you know? So where do you draw the line in, you know, making sure that your kid respects her elders, but at the same time, when do you know that if she's uncomfortable, you know, I don't even know how to solidify this question, but you know what I'm getting at, right? How do we, when do we know that it's not safe? Do we see those symptoms from our child? If I mean, because like I'm saying, uncle tu okay, tapi sebenarnya uncle tu jahat, you know, but my daughter's not telling me. I just threw that. That was not part of our little flow there, but yeah, I'm just thinking out loud now.
I think it's always safe to go with what your child tells you.
Okay.
If you make it a habit to say, are you comfortable with something? So consent starts from a really young age. And consent plays a very important role in honoring our children's instincts about how they feel, right? If they tell you they're uncomfortable, but it doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. Respect that, what they've said to you. Because there's nothing more powerful for a child than when their parent respects and recognizes their boundaries. If my mom and Ayah can listen to me, then everybody else should be listening to me, right? But if parents themselves are kind of pushing the boundaries of the children, then it becomes like, oh, okay, so this is how life is. This is how it goes. So I would go with trust them. It's always better to err on the side of caution. I don't feel like salamin atuk today. It's difficult for parents. I acknowledge that.
Especially in our culture, you know, apa ni kurang ajar punya budak meh.
So maybe to say, well, we're kind of, with everything that's happening out there, we're actually trying to practice allowing our children to trust their instincts, and this is right. So I know it's uncomfortable, but maybe they might be okay with just a hi for now, like offering alternatives that their child.
Yeah, they can just wave, and we should be okay with that. And if they're not okay with that, then it's fine. Where and how does this happen? Child grooming or sexual grooming?
I'd say it happens everywhere. If you look at statistics, 9 out of 10 cases, it's someone known to the child. So it's possibly someone at home, it's possibly someone in the family, it's possibly someone in school, someone in our religious institutions, and now with everything being online, it's in their bedrooms. If your child has their own gadget and they have it late at night, or even during the day, they have it at home in their rooms, anywhere. So the key really is sometimes it's difficult to focus on the perpetrator per se, but rather maybe it might be worth our time focusing on empowering our children to know that no matter what happens, no matter what they've done, regardless of what their parents have said, they can always turn back to the people that are the adults in their life. They can always reach out for help, even if they've done something that they think they shouldn't.
So parents or guardians or caretakers, they have to be able to communicate with their child well, or have an open communication with them, because that's the only, I mean, we're supposed to be the first place they go to if anything is uncomfortable for them, or, you know, when they feel that they need to unload. Clarissa, when the Rage team went undercover, what did you uncover? Any interesting, weird stuff? I'm sure there was, but yes. Anything that comes to
So
your mind?
other than the loopholes in legislation that we had at the time, so personally, I went undercover a few times, and what struck me, funnily enough, was just how unweird it all felt when I was sitting in front of these men and talking to them. A question that we get a lot of the time is there like a race or an age group that these people tend to belong to? And the answer is no. It could quite literally, without scaring too many people, be anyone. And they didn't seem creepy at all, despite the fact that even though I consciously knew these men are meeting someone they believe to be underage and grooming them for sexual purposes. But and so when we talk about it in retrospect, it seems easy to spot, right? This is a groomer, this is a bad man, this is a monster. But then in reality, it's a lot less
scary, because it's normal.
It's extremely normal. And so they can take on different personas or roles. For example, somebody who's teaching. So he'll, like Tensi said, just be offering advice and information. Take it if you want. Your body is your own. But then, you know, behaviorally acting differently. Or they could be also a friend, someone who's offering just their company, just their social advice, just nak jadi abang lah, you know, like you can be my adik, I'll take care of you, don't worry. So it's really not that obvious at the beginning, and that's what's scary.
You know, I remember in boarding school, we always had this abang angkat, kakak angkat, and it was always a more, you know, like mentor sort of thing. And I think that's why it's normalized in that sense, where it's okay. But now that you're actually mentioning that up, it's a bit creepy, and to think that, you know, that has happened in a boarding school where you think it's also safe. Out of curiosity, Clarissa, mostly they were men, or were there women also who would groom?
So we know
your
that
female?
it does happen to men. We've spoken to some male victims, but when we went undercover, we also had a male persona, and we were maybe hoping to find is a strong word, but hoping to find some female predators. We did not, so not in person, but we know that this does happen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thensi, Speaks focuses on creating safer spaces for children and young children, and this includes teaching children about child sexual abuse so they can be more careful and to reach out for help. How has that been, and do they actually come to you guys or come to the relevant authorities or their parents and reach out for help?
So as Speaks, we're rather new, but my colleagues and I have been working on this issue for 7-8 years.
Right.
I'd say that with children, you can tell them, you can teach them things, but if the environment is not conducive for them to speak up, they're not looking. For example, one of my previous colleagues, they ran a program, Personal Safety for Children in schools. And part of that program was identifying your 5 safe people. And some of them could not even name one person who would be a safe person for them. And a safe person is not just somebody you can go and say something to. It's also someone that's going to believe you and respond to what you say. So as Speaks, what we're trying to do now, we're trying to take a slightly different approach. We're trying to work with adults.
Right.
To have them become more comfortable with the idea of talking about sex and sexuality. The comprehensive sexuality education is very important, but parents or caregivers or primary caregivers have to be a part of the equation for it to really work. You can teach children in schools, and I think we need to, but at the same time, if they go back home and then they are shut down, then it's not really going to help them in ways that we want it to help them. So what we're doing at Speaks is we're working with adults to have them unpack and understand what we mean by sexuality education. Basically, it's almost like a sex education for adults, because if adults are not comfortable, there's actually no way they're going to be able to communicate it with children. So for the moment, we're focusing on working with parents.
And we're going to get into that in just a bit because I've got a lot to say about that. It's called grooming for a reason. The victim or the survivor in this case, sometimes they don't speak up because they feel as if they are the reason for it. It's basically them victim blame. Can you perhaps elaborate more about this victim blaming syndrome, Tensi?
So very often we hear people saying, why don't they speak up? There's just so much of effort being put into asking children to speak up.
Yeah.
But if I asked you to think about your deepest, darkest secret, and then I asked you to, you don't even go tell your neighbor about it, what would you feel?
Oh.
Right? Yeah. So imagine for that child, this is one of their deepest secrets. And asking them to speak up about it will mean that the entire world is going to change. And very often it's the people around them who don't know how to respond to it. And so it's really difficult for them to speak up. That coupled with, if you think about the grooming process, there is a relationship built between the perpetrator and the child.
Does the survivor think it's love?
Sometimes, for some of them, they do. You see, when we talk about sexual abuse, most people think, oh, violence, rape.
Yeah.
There is sexual violence that doesn't use overt physical violence. It's a psychological form of violence. You groom the child thinks they're in love with you, because that's the kind of relationship you form with them. You become the person, as a perpetrator, the person who understands the child, who's there for the child, who fulfills a particular need that the child has. And then when someone says, oh no, this is wrong, and that coupled with the fact that we do not provide children with access to information about healthy relationships, things like that, it makes it very difficult for the child to kind of separate the perpetrator from the person that they love and care for. So in terms of victim blaming, they would probably think, oh, maybe I asked for it because I didn't say no. And the other thing with sexual abuse is sometimes when your body is made a certain way, you respond to touch, you respond to caresses. And even during sexual abuse, the child's body can respond to these things. And that will also make them feel guilty that, oh, if I responded to it physically, that means did I want it? And then you have cultural practices where you allow underage marriages, you allow a lot of different things. So it goes back to the mixed messages. And then how many of you have heard of things like hold your keys in your hand when you walk to the car. Don't tie a ponytail when you're walking alone at night. Don't wear something too short if you're going to go out alone at night. Now, it's well-intentioned, but conversely, what we're telling the child is, if you do these things, then you have kind of contributed to the abuse that you are. A child, woman, adult, man, anybody, right? And the other thing I just want to quickly put out there also is that when you talk about victim blaming, we don't talk about diversities in terms of sexualities and identities, which makes young people who identify along the spectrum of identities a lot more vulnerable to abuse, because if you think you're gay and your family thinks it's wrong and you're abused or manipulated by someone, how are you going to?
Oh dear, it's really complex, very complex, very ambiguous in that sense. Clarissa, I remember campaigning for the sexual offences against children back in 2017. Thank God it was passed. But how has it been so far? How has it helped now that the bill has been passed?
One good thing about the bill, and it wasn't just sexual grooming that was included in it, but it was a whole range of comprehensive protections.
Yep.
Yes, that's correct. And one of them was having a child's court, so a court specifically for children, not to mention that child witnesses, the evidence that they provide can be corroborated. So within the first month after the bill was passed, we resolved 14 cases in a month, and that's amazing. That's pretty good. But unfortunately, and this is something that I'm sure yourself and Tensi and all of us, we can't say that we didn't see it coming, because everyone was saying, please have a Romeo and Juliet cause. We don't want to accidentally criminalize child romantic relationships, but that is what has happened. 16 and 17-year-old, so two teenagers were criminalized under the bill, and they were charged under this new bill for sexual assault, and the girl for producing child pornography of herself. So she took a photo and she sent it, and that is now considered producing child pornography. And it's like, guys, that's not what it's for.
And that's why it gets a little bit tricky, because I could go on with another topic about child marriage, because here I was saying no to banning, go and ban child marriage, but then it's not as easy, and we can't dwell on this. Maybe we'll have that another session. But I think we're running out of time. We've got another 5 more minutes. Why do we need a more comprehensive sex education, guys? Tensi.
I would say we need it because we owe it to children. It's not about we want to be kind. It's not about we want to look after children. It's about it is their right to access information. It is their right to be safe. It is their right to know about themselves, to learn about themselves. As adults, we are actually duty bearers to ensure children have this right, because no amount of trying to protect our children without giving them information and skills is going to help. And this also means that providing information and skills for adults, like I mentioned just now, just educating children is not enough, because children know they reach out for help, but the adults are not ready, then it's. So we need comprehensive sexuality education, and it includes the adults.
Clarissa, I know you're very vocal about this.
Yes, I just want to snap for Tensi for a second. It's absolutely that. The idea that we need to take something that's a moralistic idea, sexuality, it's so hidden and taboo, and we need to really intellectualize it, understand it. What is normal? What are normal, physical? You mentioned like the physical reactions to touch, and just to circle back, Daphne, on what you said about male victims, it just gets even more trickier, the psychological effects, because we tell men that they are supposed to like sex. We tell, girls that they're supposed to not like sex. And the fact is, it's just normal. This is a physical human reaction that happens. The behavior of an adult grooming a child and performing a sexual act on them is abnormal. But then we get these two mixed up, and we talk about one without talking about the other. Nobody talks at all. We don't know who to go to. We don't know what kind of contraceptives to use. I have a friend who used a morning after pill every single day, which reduced and she became pregnant. Things like this happen all the time. It's awful.
And I was just visiting Rumah Bonda 2-3 weeks back, and people always stereotype that these women or girls, young girls who get pregnant at an early stage are normally from, broken families and stuff. But no, I had 2 of them who were straight A students, and it was the first time they did the PUP method, which is perut, pancut atas perut. And you think that, wow, they're straight A's, they're smart, and they thought the withdrawal method would be safe, and alah, pertama kali takkan pregnant kot. So it's very important, and you're right, Tensi. I mean, as someone who advocates all this, but when it came to my turn to talk to my kids, I felt a bit squirmish too. So it's not that easy, although I've had that training. And one thing I find it's still unbelievable is the fact that people still find it hard to say those words: penis, vagina, your breast. They go, astaghfirullahalazim, Allah, ya Allah. But karipap, kuku, they'll say words to soften, to sugarcoat it. I don't know why. But yeah, we have another 2 more minutes. Clarissa, very quickly, you're currently taking a degree in psychology. If you do know of someone who is, I know you haven't completed it, but I'm sure you've got the know-how, or, Tensi can help out too. If you do know someone who has been, abused or assaulted or harassed, how can we help them besides, sending them to the right authorities and stuff? But us personally, what are the words we should use? What are the,
I think, so first of all, do they know that they've been groomed? Do they know that they've been sexually assaulted? Like we've talked about in the past, it's really not that obvious. A lot of people can be in denial. They can believe that they are in love. They can believe that this is love. And so if we were to go, no, this is what happened to you, it can only promote a defensive reaction. And then they become even more stronger in their beliefs about this predator that they have in their lives. And then that just makes them think, number one, we're not listening to them, and how they feel makes them less likely to trust us, or makes them feel like they can be trusted themselves for how they feel, instead of asking. So it's number 2, traumatic experiences don't always need to be talked about. It's usually from a perception standpoint. So there's no singularly traumatic event. It's usually how it's perceived. So interestingly enough, talking about it might not always help. This was something that was surprising to me. Talk therapy is good, but it's just, what does the person need? What do they want? When you have someone that you do believe has been groomed or sexually assaulted, I think it's very important to listen, to ask questions, open-ended questions, follow where they are, and then work from there instead of trying to lead them to where you are in terms of your knowledge, your standpoint, your moral beliefs, and all that.
Thank you, Clarissa. Tensi, perhaps you can just conclude our session by any final words of advice or tips for our audience.
I would say that please tell people that there is no mistake that's so big that they cannot reach out for help. And sexual assault is never, ever the survivor of the victim's fault.
Thank you so much, ladies. Clarissa, all the best. How many more years? Are you almost done?
One more
year. All the best, and I look forward to seeing you back here. Tensi, it's lovely to meet you virtually. I think we have met actually. We probably have. And then I guess that concludes our session on child grooming. I'll hand the screen back over to Abiha. Over to you.
Hi, hello. Apologies for the technical issues earlier. Gotta get used to everything online these days. All right. Thank you so very much, Daphne, Clarissa, Thansi. That was very insightful. Time to talk. Wishes to work with you guys again, definitely.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and what a great initiative.
Okay, so next up we have a performance from our very own graphic designer who sings as a side gig while managing her school life. Please welcome Nashuha.
Hi, Abiha.
Hi, Nashuha. Please introduce yourself.
All right, so my name is Nashuha, and I am the graphic designer for TimeToTalk. But other than that, I also sing on YouTube, and I actually just started this year. And with me is our guitarist that we found very last minute. His name is Omar Nordid. And he's apparently, according to him, he's just a dude who plays guitar. Yes. Yeah. So we'll be singing 2 songs for you today. Let's start with the first song, which is Heather by Conan Gray. I hope you enjoy. I still remember 3rd of December, me in your sweater. You said it looked better on me than it did you. Only if you knew how much I liked you. But I watch your eyes as she walks by. What a sight for sore eyes, brighter than a blue sky. She's got you mesmerized while I die. Why would you ever kiss me? I'm not even half as pretty. You gave her your sweater, it's just polyester, but you like her better. I wish I were Heather. Watch as she stands with her holding your hand. Put your arm around her shoulder. I'm getting colder. How could I hate her? She's such an angel, but then again, kinda wish she were dead as she walks by. What a sight for sore eyes, brighter than a blue sky. She's got you mesmerized while I die. Why would you ever kiss me? I'm not even half as pretty. You gave her your sweater. It's just polyester, but you like her better. I wish I were Heather. Oh, I wish I were Heather. Why would you ever kiss me? I'm not even half as pretty. You gave her your sweater. It's just polyester, but you like her better. I wish I were Heather. Alright. We hope that sounded okay. Alright. So for our next song it's called A Million Men by Melanie Martinez, but it's an unreleased song, and it's the main reason why we called Omar here so last minute, because he plays the guitar really good. So so this song this song, A Million Men, is actually about human trafficking and child exploitation. So we thought that we would bring awareness to it through this song. And I hope you guys will enjoy it. This Maggie was way too young to understand why she was thrown into someone else's hands, why she woke up to strange men. They tore her to pieces and she couldn't comprehend why she was locked in a basement filled with men. Should have gone to school, instead she did that. Don't touch me, I'm fragile, I'm bitter in my heart. Mama sold me for candy, and I was ruined from the start. Why'd you have to sell me to those mean old men? They cut me up in places I don't even understand. It's no mercy to me, but how will my friends understand? I'm 5 years old, sleeping with a million men. All grown up and her body has decayed. All those promiscuous games she had to play. Ooh, she skipped the jungle gym phase. She's trying to look at things in a bright way. Sees a light peeking at the end of the hallway. Ooh, she's trying to escape. I'm running full force, dear, but it's hard when you're bold. I'm weak-kneed, but I'm flying out of this hellhole. Why'd you have to sell me to those mean old men? They cut me up in places I don't even understand. It's no mercy to me, but how will my friends understand? I'm 10 years old, running from a million men. A million men. Finally the light is coming close. No turning back, run full force. Angels swoop down and grab me, and now I'm safe away from the million men who raised me. Why'd you have to sell me to those mean old men? They cut me up in places I don't even understand. It's normacy to me, how will my boyfriend understand? I'm 17 with a history of a million men. A million men, a million men, a million men. A million men, a million men, a million men, a million men. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nashuha and Omar Nordin. What a great performance you guys have. I got goosebumps all over me, not gonna lie. So, moving on, to set the scene, there are a lot of myths and misconceptions of what sex ed is supposed to be taught in Malaysia, with much information, or should I say misinformation, being propagated about comprehensive sex education. I think it is time to put the debate to rest and debunk some of the more common myths about comprehensive sex education. Now, onto the show. It's our pleasure to have our moderator, Nurin Kistina, a 23-year-old sex education advocate. Nurin believes that comprehensive sex education is very important because young adults are more prone to STDs and baby dumpings. So by providing the youngsters comprehensive sex education, we are actually indirectly providing them a safe pathway to adulthood and safe and healthy sex life. Good evening, Nurin. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me. How are you, Dania?
I'm good, thank you. Pleasure.
That's
So
great.
Nurin.
Yes.
Yeah, all right, it's fine. What were you saying again?
Yeah, no, I would just like to say that this is such an amazing topic, and I've already discussed with the panelists. We think that this is such a huge scope to talk about, and we hope that we do cover most of the important parts of it with some really great questions. I can't wait to begin.
Brilliant. Next up, we also have Dr. Rachel Winston. Dr. Rachel has been in the sexual health field for the past 1.5 years, treating patients with HIV and STDs at Malaysian Urgent Clinic Healthcare. She also provided subsidized treatment and screening packages for NGOs and underprivileged patients and people that comes from a high-risk background, such as sex workers and also drug addicts. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Rachel.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to
Pleasure.
be online. Yeah.
It's a pleasure. And next up, we have rounding off our panel, Jasmine King, who provides a safe and sex-positive space online for young Malaysians to come together to learn, break taboos, spark conversations on dating, intimacy, and sexual health. So Jasmine, as someone who grew up in Malaysia, she understands the different cultural sensitives, especially towards sexual health. So, hi, Jasmine. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. All right. Nurin, take the floor away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. How are you tonight?
Hi.
Good.
Great.
Hello.
All right.
Really good.
So we'll just start off with a really, really simple misconception, and a very common one at that. Sex education might encourage young adults to indulge in sexual activity, which does or could increase in cases of baby dumping, premarital pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, and so many more. Why do you think that is? Why is that such a common misconception? Jasmine, do you want to start?
I think this.
Oh, she's lagging. Then, Dr. Ray, do you want to take the first question?
Yes.
Yeah,
I will
go ahead.
take it first. The thing about it is the misconception is actually the opposite. The thing is, a lot of people think sex education is actually encouraging people to have sex, and therefore people actually result in baby dumping and teenage pregnancies and stuff like that, which is actually not the case. It's because they are not mentally prepared for dealing with their first sexual experiences, and they feel that peer pressure, and a lot of things that come through their mind when they're actually going to have sex with someone without the proper knowledge, or without the proper mental preparation, they get into something like that. And I think that's a sole reason why sex education should actually be given. And it's a clear misconception. Sex education doesn't cause baby dumping. It's the reason, the reason why baby dumping and pregnancies and all these STDs are actually on rising is because sex education is not given. And I feel if more and more people out there are actually more prepared mentally, or if they are more prepared, to know, the awareness is given, not only that, okay, sex is when a guy and a girl sleeps, or when someone just makes love to someone else. That's just not sex education, and that's not teaching someone to have sex. It's mentally preparing them to deal with situations, when they encounter their first sexual experience, whether it's a girl or a guy. How am I supposed to say no? Is it something that I must follow through with my partner? Is it a must? If I fall in love with someone, do I have to have sex to prove that I'm in love with him or her? So I think these are the common questions that run through these minds of young people, and they end up going into mistakes like this, which results in baby dumping and STDs. I think, what do you think, Miss Jasmine?
Yeah, so I think I was speaking to a psychologist a few last year. I think I was just having a conversation, and she was talking about how a lot of the young people who came into her clinic and for therapy and stuff, because the parents brought them there, they had children at such a young age. And a lot of the times, all these young women who came in, the main thing that they would always say is that I actually don't know how sex works. I actually don't know how babies are made. I was never exposed to all of this. I thought that, if you had sex one or twice, for first or second time, you will not be pregnant, and so all of this. So again, yes, sex education is very, very important to create that awareness, to also teach people and be frank about it. Don't shy, don't malu, don't want to say some things, just really be frank and tell them the truth.
It's actually a really good point that Dr. Ray brought up earlier, that it's actually more of the fact that we're lacking in knowledge. So whether you like it or not, they're going to say, might as well be frank about it. Don't cover the fact that they're going to have sex. Might as well give them a safe path to have sex. Dr. Ray, actually, I wanted to redirect this question to you. How do we raise awareness on the importance of sex education and implementing it in Malaysia? Because you are an avid practitioner, and you are an advocate for all these sex workers, and that's is a huge thing, because people don't look at sex workers as people who need help when they're the ones that need the help the most. So how would you do it? How would you implement and raise this awareness in our country?
Well, I think first and foremost, to raise proper awareness amongst people is to first break the stigma. Because I think the moment when we talk about sex education or sexual health, our minds automatically just go to, oh, it's STDs or it's HIV. There's way more to that. I mean, the scope is really, really large. And I feel a lot of people have that misconception. They feel that, okay, if I know about STDs and I know what is HIV, I am already an expert in sexual health. But I think there are a lot more that actually people need to know. And I think it is something, if you're talking about raising awareness, it is not only covering STDs and HIV, but also talking to them about the mental preparation, the psychological preparation that they will need, when they have their first sexual encounter. Condoms especially, you see advertisements about condoms with different flavors, different colors, different types, but the proper usage of a condom, when do you use it? Do you need it all the time? Can I carry it in my wallet? Is there an expiry? I mean, things like that should be focused, not just, okay, come and, this is the latest condom, is being released, it's on promo. A lot of people don't know that. And I think that is how we hit the awareness part. Of course, for the younger generation.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the younger generation,
it's a really good point.
Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Ray, you're lagging a little bit?
Yeah. No, I'm done.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, great. So going back to the point of prenatal pregnancies, it's a very common opinion and belief that sex before marriage is a sin, at least in my religion. So and they believe that if you provide sex education, then you're going to encourage sex before marriage. So, so Jasmine, do you think you can take this one?
Yes. Also, just to kind of add a bit on Dr. Ray's point about condoms, it's not also just about knowing how to use condom, but also raising awareness for everybody to not feel shame about buying condoms, because there was a case in Singapore where this teenager actually wanted to buy condoms, and the auntie and the person inside the pharmacy was like, "Hey, this is adult only. Why you want to buy condom?" But I'm just like, no, like we need to advocate safe sex, and how else are we going to do this? They're doing a good job. So to answer about premarital pregnancies, the idea that sex before marriage is wrong and that it's a sin, and that if we have sex education, we are promoting. Statistically, in various parts of the world, there are countries who are actually advocating or including sex education into their education. So comprehensive sexuality education. So in the Netherlands, for example, sex education begins in preschool and is integrated into all levels of subjects and schoolings. And from what they can see after that is that the Netherlands now, they have one of the lowest teen pregnancies in the world, which is, compared to the US, 6 times lower than the US. Abortion rates are 2 times lower than the US, and HIV rates are 3.5 times lower than the US. That is the Netherlands, and they have sex education inside their education system. Germany is another good example as well, where sex education is comprehensive and targeted to meet the reading and developmental needs of the students. And as a result, teen birth rates are 3.5 lower than the US, teenage abortion rates 4.5 lower than the US, and HIV rates are 3.5 lower. So it definitely proves that with sex education, with comprehensive sex education that is not fear-based, that is not abstinence-based, it actually lowers the rates, and this is proven. So whether or not it will encourage, it depends. What type of sex education are you teaching? Are you teaching fear-based, abstinence-based? Are you telling kids not to have sex because you know what it is? If you tell them to not do something, they will do something.
That's a really good point. So what we're saying is that sex education has been proven to do the opposite of what misconception is. It's been proven to help with the fact that there'll be less baby dumping, there'll be less pregnancies because they've got a safe space to not to be ashamed to buy condoms, So here I've got a statement. Sex education is only about sex. Is it true? Is it not true?
Well, I think the word here is sex. That's giving people a lot of shock. The moment you talk about sex, I don't want to hear what comes after that. The fact that you mention sex, it's already bad, And if you're talking about sex, it means you're going to just cover everything in regards to sex. But puberty, hitting puberty, the changes that happens in a child's body when they're small, the feelings that they feel, their first erection, for example, the early morning erections that they get, all these are changes that happen in their body. Or when a girl has her first menstrual cycle, that is sex education. But the problem is all these sadly is related to just one term, sex education. Probably if we used a more different pronunciation to just cover all this into one topic, maybe it'll be more approachable to the society. But the problem is when we talk about sex education, they always think that, okay, you're going to talk about how we're going to have sex with another person. And that's totally wrong. And you're encouraging us to have sex. The thing that the society needs to know is sex is something that does not need to be encouraged. It just happens. You don't need encouragement for sex. Sex is something that will eventually happen, whether you like it or not. It's just that to prepare them. And I feel, sex education is just not about sex. It's a lot more. I think the scope is really, really huge. Even a conversation between a guy and a girl, when you're dating, what are the pros and cons? What is a good touch and a bad touch? What is a consent, for example, when he's touching me and I don't want to get touched, or when he is asking me to do certain things, what am I supposed to say those times? The mental preparation and what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to react, all that falls under sex education. And that's why the term education is actually put behind the word sex, is because you're actually teaching the society on what you need to do and how you need to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally to actually face this kind of situations. And I think sex education is not about sex. I think I'm going to stand by that, and I think Jasmine is definitely going to agree with me as well. Yeah.
Agree 100%. I did a talk in the school, and they phrased the term sex education into boy-girl relationship. That's also like a great way to change the narrative, right? If sex education is so taboo, it's so scary, let's change it.
So we're saying that the word sex is scary or dirty, and it might not be appropriate for, you know, for example, toddlers. You can't just go up to them and say, look, I'm going to be teaching you about sex education. So why is it a dirty word or a bad word? Is it our culture? Is it our society? Because there are parts of the world, like you said, Netherlands, they have sex conversations so openly and comfortably. And do you think it's appropriate to include, you know, sex education, like in primary school, for example?
I feel that it's important to have some sort of like conversation about our body. I mean, you can omit the word sex, right? You can make it into body education, understanding our body, understanding relationship. And sex is only dirty if you make it dirty. And that's something that I'm very, sex is only dirty if you make it dirty. And it's dirty if you put an adult lens into such a natural and beautiful thing. If you put an adult lens, what that means is that you're looking at it and saying like, oh, you're touching yourself, very bad, very shameful. That's you putting an adult lens. But if you're going to the level of the child, then you're going to ask the child, okay, well, you're touching yourself, because this is what happens, right? Children, you see children kind of touching themselves. And it's not because they are sexual or that they are promiscuous or whatever, but it's because it just feels nice. And that makes sense. It just feels nice if you touch your genitals. So really going down to the level and really telling them, okay, it feels good, it feels nice. So yes, if you want to change the word sex, definitely go for it. As long as the most important thing is that we get the conversation going, and honestly and openly as possible.
Yes, exactly. And do you think that it's important that parents become the primary teacher for their kid to be able to even accept the sex education in the first place? Because, you know, it is fair to think that parents should be the primary teacher of their children, especially when it comes to such a sensitive content. So do you think that only parents can provide sex education?
Well, okay, you want to go first, Jasmine? Okay, so for me, okay, honestly, I feel everyone plays a part, you know, whether it's friends or whether they're aunts, uncle, and all that. But I feel parents play the most crucial role, because I feel children these days, they look up to their parents. What they see is what they follow. And they look at their parents based on every teaching that they tell. You know, if my dad is strict, if my mom is strict, they are strict. And that's what I should follow. If they feel this is discipline, then I should follow. You know, and parents being that, I think they should be the first step for them to actually understand that if I am safe and if I am comfortable talking to my parents about sex or about anything that I feel I'm curious about, then I will be able to come to this particular person, to my parents, whenever I feel like I want to. I think the first step should always be from the parents. And why sex education? Because for children, sex education is very, very sensitive. And before even opening up, I think children need to actually gain that confidence that they have a safe space with their parents to actually open up first. And if they do not, and they keep pushing away, sadly, what parents do these days is they push. Number one, they're busy. Okay. Or if, like, for example, if parents were to see a sex scene on screen or on in a movie, and they're like, you know, close your eyes, don't see, or go upstairs, you know. But if there's somebody killing someone, they all be seeing together and enjoying the movie together, you know, but they're killing someone, and that's okay. But if it's a sex scene, people always say that, you know, don't look. You're not supposed to say the word sex. You're not supposed to do it. You know, the fact that they do this is actually indirectly creating a non-safe space for them. So that ends up, you know, in children going to their peers who are also not mentally able to actually deal with this kind of situations. And then they go to the social media, they go to the internet, they find out, and everything is so over-exaggerated. And they set that as like a benchmark in their life, saying that, okay, if I want to have perfect sex, this is what I should do. This is what I should do to a girl to have this kind of sex, you know, because they feel that they can't talk to someone about it. You know, so I think this is where parents play a very crucial role. And I feel I'll definitely support that.
So you're basically saying that the explicit content to what children are exposed to, we, on the other hand, when it comes to sex education, we're trying to teach them the reality of things, right? So it's not fake, it's not scripted, it's not a movie. even things you see on TV, nothing is real. It's all fake. So do you think that sex education has to stand on its own, or do you think it can be intertwined with things like, for example, faith or health and wellness? Why is it that sex education has to be advocated on its own and not just something, to be put together with those topics?
I feel that with sex education, it should I mean, for me, like my main thing is that as long as it gets the conversation going, it could be part of faith or it could be part of health and wellness. I mean, to say that sex education is not part of wellness is not true, because sexual health is a huge thing. It is definitely part of health and wellness. It is definitely important because, again, health comprises of your body, and sex is involving your body, so it definitely should be intertwined, should definitely have this conversation. And again, sex education, comprehensive sexuality education, it is not just for young children, for kids and for teenagers. It's for everybody. It's for adults, because now, even myself as an adult, there's so many things that I don't understand about my body. And of course, with sex education, it needs to be age appropriate. Like when you're teaching young kids, what sort of things you're teaching, and slowly you go upwards. But it definitely should be a part of, if we can't have sex education as a separate thing, then we definitely should make it be part of our health our PE, pendidikan jasmani or something like that, be part of it, and not just to look at sex education as just as a science for reproduction sort of thing, but really involve it. And like what Dr. Ray was saying, really, how do we teach kids and young adults about how the conversation before we have sex and after we have sex, the aftercare, being able to say no, that's so important. Consent is a huge thing that we don't talk about enough, especially with girls. We teach girls to not be, we should teach girls to be safe, not to be awkward around people, right? Because a lot of times we're like, oh, I don't want to be awkward, so therefore I will be unsafe. But that's not good. We need to teach women and girls to be safe in certain situations.
Yes. So the last question I have is actually, well, the last two questions, but we're gonna go to Q&A soon.
That's really sad. I mean, but
yeah, sex education is viewed as a tool to control population growth. Is this a myth or a fact?
Myth.
Okay, so if you don't mind, as someone who is actually going through it, it's from personal experience. It's definitely a myth. I mean, I get it. Children are like the biggest blessing ever. Okay, I've got one. I know they're the biggest blessing ever. And I'm carrying one right now. So I know they're great. I love them to death. But that doesn't mean that I would just be careless and not use birth control or the safe options that I have. I have to be responsible as a parent. I have to be responsible as an adult. I have a responsibility to my children to give them not just financial stability, but mental health stability. Me and my husband, we can't just keep adding babies to the mix and then, never fixing things between ourselves, because everything changes when you have children. I think that young adults, when you get into sex, when you are, getting urges, trust me, please go seek advice for birth control. Again, personal opinion, I'm not saying go have sex. I'm saying that if you want to do it, if you feel like you're old enough and you're an adult and you want to do it, please go to someone you trust, get the birth control, learn everything you can about it, because it's so much safer and it's so much better for you than getting pregnant and then dumping the baby and then carrying all this trauma with you throughout your life. And then you're going to be unhappy, you're going to be depressed, and it's going to carry on throughout your whole life. I'm married, I've been married for 5 years, and I was on birth control pill for 4 years. So this is coming from someone who, I can have as many babies as I want, but you have to be responsible to yourself. You have to be responsible to your body. Is your body ready to carry a baby? Is your body healthy? Is your mental state healthy? What about your partners? Do you want to put your partner in that situation? So just be careful, be careful when you're about to enter that realm of, all this sexuality. Just make sure you have an adult to trust.
And also, condoms are cheaper than babies.
Definitely.
And condom is the only contraceptive method that can both protect you from unwanted pregnancies and also unwanted diseases or infections.
Yes. Yeah.
So
This is a surprise question for both of you, by the way. I did not send this to you when I sent you the questions, but this is for both of you, okay? So how would sex education have affected and benefited you as an individual growing up had you been privy to it?
Okay, so for me, you mean growing up with sex education? No, I didn't grow up with sex education. My family, my parents were really they didn't really mention that, okay, we're going to teach you about sex. This is what you need to know and not need to know. But to be honest, they were really open, and they were open in the sense that they were ready to answer anything, any curiosities that me or my siblings had. And they always did. And I feel, that created a very good safe space for me at a very young age. And I felt that, I was able to tell them anything. And I feel that really impacted me. And today, the work that I'm doing is from the motivation that I got from my parents, being friends with me. And I realized, when I deal with my patients, more than patients, they're my friends, and when you talk to them, because sexual diseases for me in particular, STDs and HIVs are really sensitive diseases. They're not like a common cold or a cough, and for someone to actually open up to you and say that, I'm having this for a long time, and I'm doing this with someone which I don't feel like doing, and I'm forced to do it, and I'm feeling this pain and aches. And for them to actually come out to this, you have to actually give them the confidence that it's a safe space and you can talk. And I feel that is how it has impacted me. And I am just spreading that to whoever I meet. And I feel happy about it, because I feel when it comes to sex education, before even teaching someone, you first have to give them the confidence that you are a listener and that you will understand what they're going to say. And that's
Jasmine,
exactly.
do you have anything else to add before we move on to the Q&A session for you guys?
For me, I would just say
Yes, for
sex
me
education.
personally,
No, it's a listen. Sorry.
So for me personally, like I would say that sex education, I didn't really grow up with sex education. My mom did advise, girls girls should do, shouldn't do. But I personally found sex education on my own by teaching myself, and because of all this knowledge, I am more aware how sex happens, how to prevent STIs, and how really to protect myself. A lot of knowledge empowered me, because then I had sex when I was ready, not because I was forced into doing it or because I was peer pressured, but it was when I was ready. And that is such a powerful thing, to be able to own that for yourself.
I love that. Great. Now, do we have any questions from the audience? To Dr. Rachel, what is your advice for parents on how to educate their children, and who would want to do it right, but they're struggling how?
Okay. So one of the common things is a lot of children will be asking you questions which you feel like, oh my God, I'm in like one of those bull tournaments and I feel I'm going to die if I don't answer it correctly. And most of them, they will try to beg the phone to ring. All I can say is at that point of time, no matter how difficult it looks, first and foremost, you have to first acknowledge that they're asking the right questions. Never make them feel like you're asking something wrong. Because when they ask you that, you might not know. It might have been something that they have seen. It might have been something that they have heard, but it's definitely something that they are really experiencing for them to come up and ask you something like that. Because children are very curious, and if you do not really use this opportunity to connect with them, and like I said, create that safe space, you will lose this opportunity, because this is where they actually go to the next level, their peers, social media, and other forms of advice, which are not actually accurate. So if you feel that you have problems educating them, what you can do is talk to your partner about it first. Always talk to your husband or your partner, as in, okay, there's going to come a point where, our children are going to open up and ask us these questions. And how do you think we should deal about it? If it's a guy, better the dad. If it's a girl, better the mom. Because if a guy were to come and say, Mom, I'm having, early morning erections and I don't know what to do. What is it? It puts her in a little bit of an awkward situation. So that is one thing. And secondly, don't avoid the questions. Do not belittle them by saying you are not the right age to ask all this. That is the best start, because they should feel confident that they are able to ask. They should feel that you are okay. So I think one of the best advice is do not sway away from their questions. Acknowledge and make sure they know that, okay, you're asking the right things, you're asking to the right people. Thank God you're asking me this as your parent, and you're not asking this, to your uncles or your friends, or, asking it in social media to some random stranger which you don't know. I'm happy, that you're asking me. And that should be the first step. And then slowly take your time to explain to them what it actually means. And I think, it's not a day thing, it's a long process. But eventually, at the end of the day, it's going to be worthwhile because your children will trust in you. And they'll be able to actually say that my parents are a safe space and I'm able to talk to them whenever I want, whatever I want. And that's when you've probably chatbot. Yeah.
Yeah. To just the whole point is exactly what Jasmine said just before we got into Q&A. Knowledge is power. So you as a parent, you have to, kind of know your stuff, know what to answer, how to answer according to your kid's age as well. And even if it seems like they're a bit young, but they're asking the questions, that means maybe they're just a bit more mature for their age. Maybe they've accidentally seen something and they need you to reconfirm it. Be their safe space. I think we have time for one more question. Anybody? Is there an age restriction to getting birth control pills, and is it okay to get them even if you're not married? I think both of you can answer this because Dr. Ray is really she's in the business of it, and Jasmine also super open about this. So both of you can take it.
So there is no, it's okay if you get it before, when you're not even married. There is a certain, because birth control are a controlled medicine, and you can actually get it in any pharmacy. If Guardian has a pharmacy, or Watson, for example. You do need, because it's a controlled medication, you do need to sort of sign a book to say that what medication you take out. But yes, you can take it even if you're not married. Age restriction, of course, you have to be of consensual age. Although Dr. Ray can also add on to this if there is an age restriction.
Well, I think it depends on the individual because a lot of people actually have the wrong idea, because if they're actually in a situation, like I said, some teenagers, they are actually in a lot of trap situations where they are actually exposed sexual victims to a lot of people, and not being able to tell the proper channels. I think their first step is to take birth control pills, and that's a decision they have to be mature enough to make. And if you're talking about age restriction, of course, when you reach puberty, okay, when you're having your first menstrual cycle, okay, and also before that, because it's not like you're having your first menstrual cycles when you start. Even when you ovulate, you're at a risk of pregnancy. Okay, so even before you hit that, if you feel like there are changes in your body and you haven't really menstruated yet, but there are changes, like certain pubertal changes that are happening, it's always safe to take. But of course, seek the doctor's advice first.
Yeah, just to redirect it to the actual topics of myth and misconception. Birth control pill is not just for having sex. You can take it for acne. You can take it to regulate. To regulate your everything that happens inside. Yeah, because not everyone has a regular cycle. So these are the things that sex education teaches you: puberty, your period, your cycle. So birth control pill is not just about having sex. It's about everything to clear out your skin. What do you need for it? Do you need to control your hormones? So this is you can even, I'm sure you can message Dr. Ray on her Instagram, because this is actually what she does. This is her job. And do we have time to take one last question?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we have time to take one more last question. Are we done?
I think they said we can take one last one.
Okay, yeah, one last question. Do you think that the biological parents should be the only people to advise their child on this topic when they ask? What if their parents are very against this topic and the child resorts to you? So again, should parents be the primary teacher when it comes to sex education?
This one, it hits very close to me, because I have cousins who are, I see them grew up ever since I was 10 when they were all were born, and then so their parents, they don't really talk about it. But then as a sex educator myself, I find a need to really educate, because I see how knowledge empowered me when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, having all this people all around me are having sex, and I felt really pressured. So I then had this need to sort of educate them. But of course, I was very careful with what I say lah, in terms. So I feel like it's not just parents who can educate. I think adults in general, we all play a role. We are all a community, and we should all come together and save it. Because sometimes they would come to us and ask us questions because maybe we are their safe space, right? Maybe their parents are not their safe space and they come to us, and I'm not going to turn away anybody who come up to me for education, for information. That's really important. We play a role, all of us play a role, because otherwise what's going to happen? They come to you expecting you to teach them, expecting you to sort of mentor them, and this is what I didn't have someone to help me with these things, so you can be that person.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you. So just to recap, knowledge is power. Don't be shy. Everything that you've heard about sex education is probably a myth and a misconception. And I hope we all hope that with this topic and little forum that it has helped you a lot, and you can reach out to any of us. We're pretty open. And now you have choices. Now you have safe spaces. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nurin, Dr. Rachel, and Jasmine. You guys are the very best. It was such an insightful talk. Hope to see you guys again.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, so now let's get together and lend me your ears to the echoing experience of our guest speakers. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our first speaker to all of you. Harith Iskandar is a married Malaysian actor and comedian. Harith is proclaimed as the godfather of stand-up comedy in Malaysia. And also, a fun fact, he also won the funniest person in the world in December 2016. He married Dr. Jasmine Lim in 2010, and they have 3 children together. Hi, Harith, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you very much. And thank you for that very nice introduction, Tanya.
Pleasure. All right, next up we have Ali Mukris, a 25-year-old millennial who grew up in both the UK and Malaysia. She is currently a content creation manager at an advertising agency, an industry she has been part of professionally since she was 20, following her tertiary education at Royal Holloway and Imperial College London. Ali believes that comprehensive sex education is an integral part of social issues that shouldn't be shameful to discuss, especially in Malaysia among the youth. Hi, Hallie, how are you?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. Hi, Harith.
Hey, Ali.
You're welcome. So good to have both of you today. Thank you for making time in your busy schedules. Right, so perhaps we can get cracking. Ellie, you could share your insights on how the culture influences both the society and sexuality.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so thank you so much for the introduction. So I went to school at Garden International School until the age of 16 in Malaysia. And then I moved to the UK for boarding school undergraduate and my master's. So I find that my views on society, culture, and sexuality are predominantly shaped from my upbringing in these places. So that leads me to my first point, the differences in society and culture between the UK and Malaysia. So in Malaysia, I feel that when we talk about sex, especially within Muslim families, it's all about abstinence as an end all, and there are no ifs and buts. So in contrast with Western families, I find that a lot of the parents don't necessarily condone sex, but rather they talk about the responsibilities around the topic of sex. And I find that the biggest difference is that in Western countries, sex is a personal choice between 2 consensual adults. But in Malaysia in particular, it could also be a lawful one. So you can be prosecuted for premarital sex. So in fact, in Malaysia, if you commit khalwat, or what they call breaking the close proximity law, you can be fined or jailed for up to 6 months. And this obviously doesn't occur in the UK as long as it's consensual, but there are obviously societal pressures that can come from this. But with that being said, I still think that sex should still be a conversation. So sex is just so much more than the act of sex. Sorry, I'm laughing because I'm saying sex so many times. But there are so many topics that should be discussed in schools surrounding the topic of sex. So I'll give you an example. And I think the previous session touched upon this. And it's about the difference between my time living in the UK and Malaysia and the conversation about contraception. So growing up, for me especially, from as early as the age of 11, we were taught sex education. And it wasn't, like, in my opinion, I don't think it was that comprehensive as well. We obviously talked about sexual anatomy, putting a condom on a banana. You know, we were also given a time period where we could submit questions, and our teachers would try to answer it to the best of their abilities. So even though that this was allowed, looking back, I don't think that it was like fully comprehensive, because we didn't touch upon important issues, especially social issues. You know, we didn't talk about consent. We didn't talk about female empowerment and how this affects the way that we view each other, you know? And I also talked to my friends in government school about what their experience with sex ed was like. I went to an international school. I didn't go to a government school. So I really wanted their perspective and their experiences with sex education. And I found out that actually in Malaysia, sex education is usually taught at the age of 15, which actually worldwide is quite old to start learning about sex education. And they did say that learning about sex, they learned about it in a Agama class. So this already took the perspective, a religious point of view. And the teachers would mention things that were haram or halal, what is wrong and what is right. But it wasn't really that informative that was and useful to them when it actually came down to it. And this was, I think, completely different when I moved to the UK, because not only did I go to an all-girls boarding school, but a lot of the staff were predominantly female. And if I had any questions, I could go to the nurse. So with contraception, for example, and I had questions, they would say things like the coil, the patch, the implant, you know, these were all things that I had no idea about, and there were absolutely no barriers. And, you know, like talking about all of these things with them did not make me want to like have sex more. Like I was suddenly like sex crazed or something. Like that just didn't happen. Like if anything, having these open conversations actually made me feel more enlightened about the topic. It made me so grateful because it was actually quite useful, especially now that I'm married. So, you know, I just had no idea. And I don't think that like culturally, even my friends and my family in Malaysia would have been as open with it. And, you know, I think like what they mentioned previously, like the contraception pill has so many uses besides just the act of sex. Like even my boarding school mates, they were saying that they use the pill. You know, some even said that they use the pill to make their boobs bigger, or like some went on the pill to get clearer skin. Some people just wanted to regulate their periods. And, you know, it's not the contraception pill, it is the pill, but at the end of the day, it's also a hormonal pill. And yeah, so I just think that the biggest bottom line to this is that people and families in our society and culture are not talking about this. And when we're in a society where we just drum no, 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 and just preach abstinence, you will inevitably get a bunch of rebellious teenagers, you know, finding their way, who are just screaming yes, like they want to do it. And even worse, I think that if they're not taught a comprehensive sex education or have nobody trustworthy to go and talk to, it can lead to a high amount of both societal and economic repercussions. So this leads to my next point. Talking about sex should be a scientific talk, not an emotional or religious one. So it's better to be informed than to be ignorant. And I feel like in Asian families, speaking from experience from a Malaysian Muslim family, not talking about sex can be detrimental. And it's also the way that we view sex. It's such an easy route to scrub off the topic as promiscuity and just bad in general. It's taboo. We don't want to talk about it. But if we change this viewpoint to a more scientific approach and more of a matter of fact instead of just bad, and learning new things, we might tackle one of the more serious offenses that happen in Malaysia, such as baby dumping and incest. So actually, in fact, just from the MCO, just from this year, the number of incest cases, and this is a particular case, like particularly in the state of Malacca, the number of incest cases actually jumped 100% from the previous year. And this is especially in the rural areas. And I know that these topics are just really, really hard to talk about. Like, we don't want to talk about incest. We don't want to talk about rape. We don't want to talk about all of these things, but we must talk about them. We need to learn from them. we need to find out the root problem and the causes and teach about them from when you're old enough. And one of the things that I want to talk about is like the societal and cultural pressures that are placed on a woman. So, for example, let's take virginity, for instance, as an example. Historically, virginity is seen as an indicator of pureness and is actually borderline holy. Like some people consider virginity as holy. It's in the Dracula movies as well. And in my opinion, like a woman's virginity is just like none of your business. Some people hold the values so high that they would go as far as to check whether a woman's hymen is still intact. And in Malaysia and culturally, like this is actually a thing. Like last year, an article actually went around about a man who asked his fiance to go to a gynae to check whether her hymen was still intact. And this is just such a violation. And, this is just an indicator and like how people like hold such a high regard on something such as a hymen. Like it just means that there's a flaw in our sex education. And, like this is not necessarily solely an Asian and Malaysian problem. Like T.I., who is a famous rapper, he was publicly vilified recently because he went out in public and said that he regularly checks or like brings his teenage daughter to a gynae to check whether her hymen is intact. And these are such draconian myths that need to be like stumped, because there are so many ways that your hymen can break, right? You can do sports, you can do the splits and your hymen can break. You can ride a horse and your hymen can break. And like these are just things that people need to talk about and address. So another thing that I want to talk about is the pressure placed on women based on their choice of clothing. We have to brush the conception of a person just from the way that they dress. Be rid of this. Not only does this limit a person's personal expression, but it can lead to self-esteem issues as well. So just because a person is wearing a short skirt doesn't make them a whore. And it's the way that we view and value others which makes a difference in our society. Respect goes a long way. And actually it works both ways too. So it's not just on women, but it's also on men. So as a society, we place so many expectations for a person to be like a girly girl or like a manly man, and these are boxes that they want us to fit into, but the world is evolving. So for example, we take men, for example, assault doesn't always only happen to women, it also happens to men. So when I was in the UK, like assault on men was a fairly new topic. I only saw it in the news a handful of times. I only graduated last year, so this is quite recent. But when I came back, I didn't hear about assault on men like in a domestic abuse relationship at all. And I feel like we should be ready to have these conversations. And there are so many reasons for this, because I feel like maybe some men don't want to come out. They don't have the courage to speak out about their assault. This goes against culture and society's view of a man, but it's also the way that we teach young boys. So when we should stop saying things like, you shouldn't cry, it's a girl's thing to do, like you shouldn't show emotion, you should be tough. It's these kind of phrasing and words that you're teaching boys that can lead to some really bad repercussions as they're older. And it becomes a really toxic environment for people around them. And when it comes to sex education in schools, sex education should be taught equally between men and women. So, just because I feel like even when I was in school, sex education was very directed towards me as a woman. A woman should take care of themselves and make sure you have a condom, But I feel like with men, they should understand just as much about themselves as they do about sex-related topics pertaining to women. And I feel like this is really important from a young age. So I find that to conclude, in our society and our culture, we've got a long way to go in tackling these issues, but diminishing the shame around the overall topic and being more informed and talking about it freely really allows us to take the steps in improving it. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. So Ali told me via WhatsApp that she was a little bit nervous before this. No, you weren't. You nailed it.
Thank you.
Very interesting, though, to hear, especially you set up your background and where you came from. What's interesting to me, listening to everybody from earlier on as well, and I'm just beginning to realize is that when we talk about sex education, I'm hearing now that you as women or as girls, the come from or the educational come from was in terms of how to protect yourself, how to save yourself, how to take the self protections, etc., etc., etc. Whereas I can tell you from my experience, grew up in Malaysia. I went to government school. Yes, that means I had zero sex education, other than my older brother. Thanks. But when we're taught about it as boys, or when we're spoken to as boys or as young men, I think what's missing is the lessening of the. I'm going to use the word attack. I don't mean attack in that way, but it's all about controlling yourself and not doing it and not jangan ikut nafsu and stuff like that. Where I am beginning to understand is that what's missing is actually, it's not just a matter of controlling nafsu. What's missing is the idea of respect, the idea of kindness, the idea of knowing that this is a human thing and we're dealing with human beings, rather than you have to control yourself, you have to not think about it, you have to don't do this, don't masturbate, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, which is always taught as stopping you what you're going to do, but you need to stop it, although it's natural that you're going to do it, but you need to control yourself, rather than here are the reasons that, or the negative things that could come out of it in terms of hurting, damaging, in terms of creating a situation worse than it was before. And culturally, I think, number one, we're all here, we're all speaking in English. We are Malaysians, but predominantly we're talking English. I think most of us are thinking in English, and it's really hard to truly understand or truly get into the psyche or the mindset of the other. I'm not going to place it to a race base, but when you think in a different language or you're both brought up culturally different, we all, I mean, let's admit it, Ali, as well as myself, I'll put that in that group. We have a certain exposure to Western perceptions, Western ideals and all. And I'm not saying it's wrong to champion that, but it's to me, it's a little bit, it's very superficial. And the reason, let's put it this way. 40 years later, from when I first started hearing the word sex education, we are still here talking about sex education as if nothing's happened in the last 40 years. Hell, probably nothing's happened in the last 100 years. And this is because culturally, who are we speaking to? I can only speak for myself. I've got 3 kids, boy, girl, boy, and they're very young. They're only 8, 6, and 5. But I'm beginning to be aware that number one, they pick up things much faster than I remember picking up. I mean, Ali, when were you? Can you remember what age you were when you first kind of heard about sex and it's taboo, or don't speak about it? Can you remember that age?
I mean, it was definitely a topic that we thought was funny, like when we were taught, or even the mention of sex when we were in primary school was something that we would giggle at. So I feel like no one actually said like it was wrong from a young age, but like that connotation and that feeling was already there. And I think it's just from the way that my friends would talk about it. And
you're talking about an experience from the garden school point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I
can imagine.
Yeah.
From an early age, I can imagine.
Year 1.
From a boy's point of view, okay, I went to a government school. Boys' point of view, yes, it was silly and haha, naughty to talk about it as well. But it was definitely not something silly, haha, and naughty to talk about that you could bring up with your dad. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't an episode of Ultraman that you could share with your dad. You laughed amongst it with your friends, but it wasn't a laugh. You knew that it was not something you were allowed to share with your parents
Exactly.
or with
Yes.
someone older than you, right?
Mhm.
So the thing is, I don't know. I guess I'm just struggling with the thought that I know we're all trying to do something here. We're all trying to get this out as it's opening de-taboo the taboo topic, and it seems almost it seems almost, not to say scary, but it is. I've been reading the comments on YouTube as well. It is scary how, at least with the 350 people who are watching on YouTube at that moment, how so many, and most of them were women in this case, who were sharing, had an experience of inappropriate sexual encounter from a very, very, very early age, which leads me to think, and I've spoken to enough women about this over the years, that it's probably happened to 90, if not 100% of every single girl. And
Yeah.
boys, I would say, I know personally, not that high a percentage, but still high enough to go, what? So, yeah, when you talk about education, also education at what level? Are you talking, government school education, non-government school education? It's, how do you maneuver that labyrinth of all the different, what is taboo to this culture and not taboo to the other culture? I mean, it's mind blowing, and I'm glad I'm in this topic of conversation. I'm glad I'm in this seminar, but it's also like it's the last 2 hours have been kind of very eye opening, and also like at the back of my mind, like wow,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
huge.
I think also like what you were saying, opening these doors and having these conversation. You don't have to get to the nitty gritty from like teaching your kids like from a young age about the nitty gritty of sex, for example, but just to make them like aware about signs like predatory behavior, boundaries, these kinds of things. Like you don't have to go all in all at once. I feel like any parent, my parents didn't do this with me. They're gonna get so angry if I said that. But I didn't get the sex talk from my parents. And so I feel like some of these things, even from a young age, we snicker and we laugh about it, but it's important as well to know the gravities and the bad side from a young age as well. So for me, it's quite important to be able to recognize that.
And okay, so Ali, you're probably one generation down from me, and you probably have a different experience growing up with this. But I know for a fact that my 8-year-old and right now my 8-year-old is already having those words in his vocabulary online, and I don't think he understands, like, just the word porn. And I know for a fact that he doesn't understand what it is, and he's probably viewed a couple of clips based on his history, which we need to now check his parents. But yeah, I can remember in my head that I was probably 12 or 13 before that kind of imagery or that kind of word appeared in front of me. And now it's 6 years old, 5 years old. It's a different process. It's a much faster awareness out there. I mean, that's why I asked you early on. Can you remember at what age? I don't know whether you grew up with the internet. I certainly didn't. But now with the internet, we need to get to it faster.
Yeah, well, I'm in that weird age where like we still had cassettes, but then like when I was but like when I was old enough, the technology and the access to information grew exponentially. So I feel like I was in that in between. And for me, like for example, with your example of porn, I was first exposed to it around the age of 11, I think, and I had no idea. And I think like the first time I saw like a porn still, like I was feeling things in my body that I did not understand. Like I was just like, what is happening? Like this was during puberty, so a lot of new firsts for me. And I think it was around that time that my school introduced sex ed into the curriculum. So it was a it was definitely a process, and I definitely think that the accessibility to information now, especially because I have a younger sister who's 13, like they have access to the whole world, and I didn't have that personally growing up, especially when I was going through puberty, but they do. But we just don't know whether they're accessing the correct information. So I feel like that's why it's important to talk about it as well, not just get information
Yeah.
online.
So even using a word like the correct information, it's what's correct to you and me is completely opposite to a lot of other cultures as well.
Yes,
Dania,
for
you wanted
sure.
to say? Dania is here with us. Hello, Dania.
All right. Hi.
Dania.
I have to agree that somehow this is such a hard topic to talk about in this generation, especially. So, yeah, I think we can de-taboo it. So I think we've got at least one question waiting on the line. Let's bring in that question as we move on. All right, so the first question is, what advice would you give to young girls who are recovering or healing from sexual trauma? Is it possible to view or enjoy sex in a positive way again after such a traumatic experience? Probably, Harith, you can go. Your input on this?
Okay. Now, let me just preface this by saying that I am in no position, either professionally or otherwise, to be giving any type of advice in particular to this particular question. But what I would say is, and this is just coming from someone who's lived exponentially or lived this long, that what I find is talk about any type of trauma. If you look at something, trauma at the end of the day is actually in the mind. It's in the memory of the experience. It's in the thoughts of the experience, and it's in the feeling you get when you think of the experience.
Technically, you'll grow with it, right?
Yeah, but so it's. I'm not making this sound like, oh, it's just so easy, just get over it. No, it's not as easy as that. But what I would like to say is that when it comes to any kind of trauma, death, for example, you will get over it. You can get over it, and you'll come to a point where, when you look back at something that is traumatic, you will, with the right tools, with the right mental tools, you'll be able to not only just get over it, but actually look at it in a different way or have different feelings, different from what you currently feel about that. Now, I'm not saying, yes, that's easy to do, and I've got no experience in sexual trauma, but trauma in general, yes, you can get over it. And I would love to just, to anybody who is going through anything, like, yes, it's probably the worst thing in the world at the moment, and I've no doubt it is. Stick around long enough, and you can get through it.
Perhaps, Ali, you have anything to contribute as well?
Yeah, so I think with trauma or sexual trauma, I do have experience in trauma. And I do find that when it comes to dealing with it, you should definitely listen to yourself and the signs that your body and your mind are giving you. You should never be pressured by other people to do certain things. If it doesn't sit right with you, you shouldn't do it. Some people say, like, just an example, if you were raped, and they'll be like, well, why didn't you go to the cops? It just might not be right to you at that moment, So people deal with things differently. And I feel like if someone close to you or a young girl who is recovering and healing from this comes to you with their issues, you should never approach it from your point of view, because you have to see it from their point of view and try and understand that, deal with it the way that they want to deal with it. And I feel like, is it possible to view and enjoy sex in a positive way again? This is obviously very subjective. It depends on how well you deal with your trauma. But in my opinion, if I am dealing with any sort of trauma, and I have dealt with trauma, abuse, that kind of stuff. For me, the easiest way to get over this kind of stuff is to talk to the people closest to me, because they kind of give you a perspective, a rational, outsider perspective that can kind of ground you. Because I feel like when I am put in a situation where I have to deal about this, I approach it very emotionally, and I say things and I lash out and I hurt myself, or for instance, So it's this kind of thing that once you overcome the hurdle and once you're able to talk about it, that's already a step in overcoming traumatic experiences, right? So I feel like once you overcome more and more of these hurdles, you will view and enjoy sex in a positive way again, as long as you're able to do that in however way.
All right, great. I really think that talking actually helps with you dealing your past traumas, right? So, I think we've got another question from the floor. Should we pin this up? All right, from Rajesh, sorry. When we talk about like clothing or even de-emphasizing virginity, it is important to raise awareness in our society. But with the cultural and religious barriers we have, how do we go about it? Perhaps any of you would like to contribute?
Okay. Yeah.
Interesting.
What do I say without getting in trouble? Yeah, I think in my opinion, and it is only opinion, netizens out there, religion in this country is the perception of it is really out, in my opinion, out of bounds, if you want to use that word, because religion is, I feel, is so personal, and yet sometimes in this country it is treated as something that is no, it's public, and everyone has got to throw their 2 cents into it. So yeah, how do you raise awareness about something like this with all the religious barriers? I have no idea, but what I do know is that there are a lot of good people out there, personally and publicly, working at breaking down those barriers, including all the individuals and teams involved in this seminar, because it is not the easiest thing to break down cultural and religious barriers that have been entrenched, not just in the last 20, 30 years, but perhaps in the last couple of generations. For whatever reason, in this country, we just have to say one word, and then everybody will jump in and say, you can't speak about that because it's not your religion, it's not your race, it's not your place, blah blah blah. We've lost the ability to have a discussion, just to hey, here's a word, let's talk about it. No, you can't talk about it because you are not Malay, Chinese, Indian, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, how do you raise awareness in the society? Just keep plugging away and just chipping away. Number one, start with yourself. Number two, start with your family and your people around you. So I'm starting with my kids.
All right, Ellie, you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I agree completely with what Haris just said. When it comes to cultural and religious barriers, when it comes to topics such as this, and how we dictate how people live and all of that stuff, like, in my opinion, I mean, I'm gonna get shit for this, but like, I personally don't agree with any of these barriers, because I feel like you're better for it when you talk about all of this stuff. But how do we go about it? I mean, at the end of the day, there are still barriers to this, and I do agree with Harith. I do think that it starts with you and the people around you, and that just snowballs. So I do think that, like, it does multiply, and if you approach it in a constructive way, then it follows through to the next person, and it follows through to the next person, and then, like, eventually you've changed society. So I feel like that's the dream. But I mean, what we're doing today is already a big step. So that's basically how we're raising awareness in our society, right? Doing things like this.
Yeah. All right. So that was basically concisely explained from both of you. So I think on that note, we've come to the end of the talk. Thank you so much, Harith and Ali, for the viewpoints and suggestions.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have both of you speaking today despite your busy schedules.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye. All right, so moving on to the next session. As we all are aware of, the fact that it's always the victim that gets blamed for not taking actions directly to the police when they get assaulted or harassed. But honestly, it's never an easy process to take steps, especially with having all the society's eyes all on the victim blaming about the clothing, their perceptions on perhaps how they basically how they talk. So sexual assault or harassment, should I say, is basically a wrongful act. So if you believe that anyone around you or yourself probably or your loved ones, your family members, your best friend has been a victim of it, please make it a priority to get a safe place and seek for help. So with me, I got two distinguished guests to talk about this. First up, she is a 23-year-old pursuing her bachelor's in medicine and surgery. She is also a co-founder and vice president of Sukarelawan Society and the current vice president for DBRO project. Let's welcome Charlene Rahim. Hi, Charlene. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here.
Brilliant. And next, I have IUMW Services Program Officer, Maina Patel, with me. So with her background working with B40 and marginalized communities, Maina wishes to ensure all communities are aware of gender-based violence issues and ensure that they know where to seek help. So good evening, Maina. Hi, how are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. All right, Charlene, whenever you're ready, you may take the floor away from me.
All right. So hi guys, I'm really glad to be a part of this talk today because I feel like in Malaysia especially, we treat conversations related to sex, such as sexual assault, sexual education, teenage pregnancies, even baby dumping, as tabooed or stigmatized subjects, which are held only under hushed tones. So I feel like it is not until we create these conversations that we can build avenues for actual solutions to be brought to the table and actual change to take place. So in preparation for this talk, I actually did a lot of research to make sure that I could provide you guys with all the information that you need in the event that you or someone you know will be sexually assaulted. So I actually consulted my brother, who is a public prosecutor and has dealt with thousands of cases of sexual assault. And yeah, so I'm going to jump right into it. So firstly, I'm going to give you guys some statistics. So over a third of Malaysian women have actually experienced sexual assault as compared to 17% of men. So for women, that's about 37% of female population. And I think that that is something that is incredibly sad. And unfortunately, only 15% of these cases are actually reported to the police. So I think the reason behind that is because women have a tendency to keep silent in more than half of their sexual assault cases. And that is because in many instances, they're questioned and doubted, and at times even re-victimized. So to make it worse, the burden of proof is always placed on the victim. There's this vicious culture of victim blaming in our society, which I think stems from a lack of awareness and also empathy for assaulters. So just recently, we had a minister that proposed the enactment of a sexual harassment law. So you would think that this is something that is good, but the sexual harassment law was proposed to protect men from being seduced into committing crimes such as rape. So his actual statement read that I propose a sexual harassment act to protect men from the actions, words, and clothing of women, which can cause men to be seduced to the point that they can commit acts such as incest, rape, molestation, pornography, and likewise. So this minister in question, Muhammad Imran Abdul Hamid, said that this law was important to protect men. And look, okay, I understand the need to protect men from sexual harassment and the need to protect men from women that cry wolf. But creating a law that protects perpetrators is just, I don't even know what to say about that. So before we get into the steps to take if you have been sexually assaulted, I actually wanted to talk about what sexual assault actually is. So contrary to popular belief, sexual assault isn't just another term for rape. It also encapsulates all forms of inappropriate sexual contact, which outrages modesty. So this includes stuff like molestation, inappropriate touching, sexual grooming, and it also includes cyber sexual assault. So this is basically the possession, the posting, and sharing of explicit photos without consent. So to any of you vengeful boyfriends who are still trying to threaten your ex-girlfriends, whatever you're trying to do is illegal. Rape, on the other hand, is essentially defined as the insertion of a penis into a vagina without consent, and it's punishable by a minimum of 10 years and up to 30 years of imprisonment with whipping. Okay, so I know when we talk about stuff like sexual assault, it's usually in terms of adults, and I know that a lot of people that are watching this are also adults wanting to learn about what they can do if they ever find themselves in these situations. But I feel like especially during the MCO, we saw a lot of cases of child sexual assault. And the saddest thing about these cases is the fact that children tend to experience sexual assault for years. It can go on for years because these children don't really understand what is going on to them. So I really wanted to discuss how to prevent sexual assault in children to any of the parents or any of the future parents or even newlyweds that are watching this. So I've come up with 4 basic tips on how you can protect your children from sexual assault. So the first of them being, give them ownership of their body. So how you do this is by reminding them that their body is theirs and that nobody should have the right to touch them and make them feel uncomfortable. You have to empower your children to say no and tell them immediately if anything is bothering them. You also have to use the right language. So this is something that I thought was really interesting because apparently as soon as your kids start to discover differences in their genitals, you have to teach them the correct names for their anatomy. So why this is important is because in most cases of child sexual assault, most children don't really have the right vocabulary to explain or describe what has happened to them in the reporting process. So a good example of this was a case that my brother was telling me about yesterday. He had a case regarding child sexual assault, and the victim was telling the police about a man who was touching her down there, and then how she saw a burung terbang around the room, or a bird flying around the room. So this was something that was incredibly puzzling in the courtroom. It was puzzling to the police. It was puzzling to the court process, until my brother turned around in the courtroom and looked at the assaulter who was wearing his prison uniform and realized that his shirt wasn't entirely buttoned and he saw a wing on his chest. So at that moment, my brother actually asked this sexual assaulter to unbutton his shirt and realized that there was a tattoo of a bird on his chest. So it was in that moment that everyone in the courtroom realized that in the eyes of this child and in the innocence of a child, the trauma that she was enduring at that point made her not see anything that was going on except for the bird on this person's chest. So I think it's so incredibly important for us to teach our children the right language regarding their bodies so that in the event that anything were to happen to them, they can tell you about it. Okay, so the third tip, I think, is to create open communication and a comfortable environment for your children to talk about their privates in a lighthearted manner. So when I say this, I don't mean like talk about your entire body with your parents all the time. I just mean to create a comfortable environment so that when they talk about it, they can tell you about it. They can tell you if things are going on in their lives, because a lot of the time, sexual assaulters tend to bank years and years of assault on their victims on the basis of secrecy, on the basis of these children not feeling comfortable enough to tell their parents about what's going on to them. And the last one, which I think is really interesting, is the swimsuit rule. So basically, anything on your body that can be covered by a swimsuit should not be touched, looked at, or photographed by another person. You also have to explain to them the concept of safe touch, whereby on rare occasions, parents, caretakers, or doctors might have to touch them in order to keep them clean and healthy. Okay, so we've come to the most important part of the talk for me. And it's something that I hope that if you guys have watched this entire thing from 6 o'clock and you guys don't remember anything by the end of it, I hope that you guys can take this home, because it's something that I wish that when I was at that age that I had known. It was the kind of knowledge that I wish I was equipped with when I was younger. So it's what you can do if you have been sexually assaulted. So I have broken this up into 3 parts. Legally, medically, and mentally. These are steps that you can take if you have been sexually assaulted. So in legal proceedings, if you have been sexually assaulted, these cases are often a he says, she says situation. So what do I mean by that? When I say it's a he says, she says situation, it means that there's a lot of argumentation on whether or not consent was provided. So because a lot of the times you can go into a police station and tell the police officer, I have just been sexually assaulted. And they bring the sexual assaulter into the police station and he will just say that she wanted it to happen. So how do you actually determine that the sexual assault was an assault and it wasn't consensual? So my brother told me that the key factor that law enforcement use to determine whether or not consent was given is timeline. So by timeline, I mean that the sooner the report is lodged, the better the chances are at securing a conviction. So the earlier, the better. And my brother gave me a timeline that you have to identify all of these fresh test injuries from the assault within 72 hours of the assault taking place. Because past that, some of your injuries may heal internally and externally, and it's harder to corroborate the rape and rebut whatever your assaulter will be saying. So I think it's also very important to understand that a lot of sexual assault victims undergo so much trauma. Like right after the assault has taken place, they won't actually want to talk about it. So I understand if they don't want to go immediately into a police station and talk about what has just happened to them. So as long as it's within a 72-hour time frame, I think it should be fine. Also, most victims of sexual assault, they have this psychological predisposition to feel dirty. And what I mean by that is that immediately after the assault, they will want to clean themselves internally, externally. The clothes that they were wearing, they will want to throw it away, wash it, or even burn it, which is understandable. But if you are trying to seek justice, this is counterproductive to the process, because if you are trying to prosecute your assaulter, you will be washing away important DNA. So if you were to be sexually assaulted, try your best to keep your clothes or whatever was worn or used during the assault, so that if you were to go to the police, you can send it to forensics and extract DNA. Next, and this is something that I really just learned about through all my research for this talk, from a medical perspective, you can actually visit any government hospital if you have been sexually assaulted, and visit the specific area of the hospital in the emergency department known as the One-Stop Crisis Center. So the One-Stop Crisis Center, or the OSCC, is basically a team that is specifically assigned and trained to deal with sexual assault. So what they actually do is that they give you medical treatment, emergency contraceptives, screening for STIs, and they can also collect medical evidence. And also, if you have not made a police report, you can make one there. So immediately after a sexual assault, you can make the decision whether or not you want to see doctors first, or if you want to go see the police first and talk to them about what happened. Because it's incredibly important that you get your story across, so that in the future, if anything were to happen to you, you have these cases in records to protect you from anything else. Thirdly would be mentally, and I know that this is something that is a very delicate issue, but according to statistics, sexual assault victims are 6 times more likely to experience symptoms of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. So 30% of these victims also experience major depressive disorders and are 4 times more likely to contemplate suicide. So that's why I think it's incredibly important that after an assault and after you've hopefully made a report, that you have a safe space and you have a good support system, even if it's your friends or your families or a relative or just even an educator, someone that you can talk to about these issues. Because one thing that I realize is that a lot of the times for these victims, they don't really want to talk about what's going on, because they would think that they can internalize it and they can take care of themselves. And I think if I've learned anything from all of my self-help books, it's basically that thinking that you can handle all of your problems Thinking that you can deal with all of your issues on your own without anybody's help is actually a trauma response, because you don't believe in people, you don't trust people anymore, and you don't think that they can take care of you or help you throughout your situations. So it's incredibly important for you to be able to talk about these things, or even find a counselor so that they can help you, they can help your family in the healing process one step at a time. Okay, so now that I've talked about all of this, I think the main question is, what can we do as a society and as individuals to help these victims? So first of all, we need to start having these conversations more. We need to have this conversation with the people sitting next to us, with the people we see in school, with our families, with our relatives, with anybody who wants to have this conversation. We need to normalize this conversation, because we need to also recognize that it is up to people like you and me to generate conversations surrounding stigmatized issues to actually normalize them. Because you cannot alleviate the problem if you don't talk about it. So what this actually does is that when you start talking about it more, when you start making conversations about sexual assault and sexual education and baby dumping, when you start making all these conversations normalized, it destigmatizes the victims. And when it destigmatizes the victims of sexual assault, it makes it easier for these victims to come out with their stories, to seek justice, to help themselves. And I think that this can go a really long way in terms of making sexual assault something that we can hold perpetrators accountable for by making the conversation more comfortable. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to this and for taking part in this entire conversation. I know that a lot of you are probably interested in learning about sexual education, and that is really good. That is one step in the right direction. And yeah, I hope you guys learned something. I'm going to pass this on to Awam now.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'm gonna currently do is that, hi everyone, my name is Meena, sorry. What I am gonna do now is to actually share screen. Okay, can you all see my screen? Hello, people, everyone? Okay, awesome. Okay, so cool. So my name is Awam. My name is Meena, sorry. I'm from Awam, which is All Women's Action Society. Thank you for inviting us today. So what do we do? So Awam has been around for over 30 plus years, and there are three main areas of work that we do. First is on our public education trainings that we do. Second is on the advocacy that we do, which is on policy change. And the latest thing that what we're pushing for currently is on the sexual harassment bill, which I believe a lot of you signed on our petition. So thank you so much in trying to push for the sexual harassment bill. And the part that I focus on in Awam is on our services. So what Awam offers is, what Awam provides services to survivors, and this is regardless of gender, ethnicity, economic background, or anything. Anyone who needs support, we provide, number one, legal information. Number two, we accompany survivors, to go make a police report, to go to the hospital, to go to the welfare office, basically anywhere the survivor needs to go, we would accompany them for moral support and to help them through the process. And lately, what I've also seen is a lot of times issues that survivors face is also on language. Because, when you go make a police report, you have to speak, fluent bahasa, which is not something everyone is able to do. And of course, number three, what we also offer is counseling, because due to the trauma that survivors face, they definitely need counseling. So directly diving into the topic for today, which is on steps to take if you have been sexually harassed. So I think from the start, from 6 o'clock today, we've been hearing about, sexual harassment, child grooming, and basically harassment, sexual harassment. So what do we do when such a thing happens? So steps you can take. Number one, tell the perpetrator. This is if it's someone that you still have you talk to. So this is someone who kind of inappropriately touched you. Tell them point blank, like their behavior is not welcomed. If you're not able to talk to them directly, you could write it down. You can email it to them or send them a text message, because all of this are also evidence that you can also use later that you had communicated your not consent and your, how you did not like that sexual act in the first place. And number 3 is also to share the incident with friends, housemates, colleagues, family members. Other steps that you can also take is you can write down a note of what happened. So this will also help you, write down a chronology of what happened. Because often what happens is when you go meet the police, and police have a tendency of, like reframing questions and asking you again. And sometimes when survivor is unable to explain clearly what happened, police then sometimes will be a bit suspicious of the act. Of course, then is reporting it, and then last but not least is claim your right, demand your right to be updated on the case of what's happening. Because sometimes police don't necessarily update you on what happened, so you need to make that very clear. And of course, next is what do you do if your friend or family member is the one who's being harassed? So these are the 5 B's when it comes to being an active bystander. First is you step in and directly tell the perpetrator that no, stop this act. IUM has also IUM receives cases, 2 to 3 cases per day on just sexual harassment. Of course, some of it is physical sexual harassment, some are online sexual harassment. So what often we tell survivors to do, what we tell bystanders to also do is to directly step in. Sometimes what the perpetrator would say is they weren't sure, they didn't know the act that they did caused the survivor to feel uncomfortable. Because, okay, it could be someone who, I'm just a generally very friendly person, I have a habit of tapping someone's shoulder, but someone may not be comfortable with it. So you need to directly tell the perpetrator to stop doing that the survivor is uncomfortable with that. Second thing that you can do is you can distract. Like, hey, let's go out for dinner. Let's go out for a meal. To distract the conversation, to distract the incident that's happening right there. If you all are in a team, you can delegate one person to attend to the survivor, one person to pull the perpetrator away and kind of, like, hey, stop doing that. Kind of teamwork in handling that. Document is very important as well. As a bystander, like if it's happening in your workplace, you can actually help take notes of what is happening and all of that as well. You can help them take notes or try and take a picture if you could. And another step that you can take is you can delay the incident from happening. So here are some case studies that I would like to share with you when it comes to sexual harassment. Number one is the first story that I have is that it's never too late. In my first week of joining IUM, I had a survivor who was sexually harassed 3 years ago. And at that time, she was a minor. Even though it was 3 years ago, we still went to go make a police report, because making a police report is not just for the police to take action, but it's also important for the survivor to also have ownership that, you know what, this happened to me and I'm taking an action towards what happened to me, even though it was some time ago. And yes, the police did take action on the case. They did call in the perpetrator. They checked in with a few other friends in the friend circle who have also been harassed by the same guy. So that was on the first story. So it's never too late. Do not think that just because this case happened some time ago, 1-2 months ago, it's never too late to make a report. You should always make a report. If you're afraid to go by yourself, there are a lot of organizations who are there to help you out. IUM is here ever ready to assist. There's WAO, there's Sisters in Islam. So there are a lot of organizations out there who are ever ready to accompany survivors to make a report and help them through the process. The second case I would like to share is on teamwork. So this was a case that a sexual harassment that happened in a workplace. So what happened there was that because the survivor was being harassed, she informed the HR, and the perpetrator was a client of the office, not the staff, but a client outside. And what the office HR team did was that when this guy were to come in, they would ask the survivor to, okay, you know what, they would not let the perpetrator meet the survivor. So the entire team stepped in to prevent the perpetrator from further harassing the survivor in person. And he didn't have the number, so there was no other kind of harassment that was happening there. And at the same time, the team also got in touch with IUM to assist the survivor in making the police report. Last but not least, another case that I would like to share is on the V2K case. I think a lot of you are aware of the sexual harassment online sexual harassment that was happening via this Telegram platform, where a group of men just kept sharing pictures of girls and further harassing these girls. So even for that case, we accompanied a group of survivors to go to the police station to make a report. Police did their investigation. It's still an ongoing case because currently there's a lot of smaller pop-up groups that's coming up. So these are some of the cases of sexual harassment, online and physical, where actions can be taken and will always be taken no matter what the situation is. Even if it's hearsay, hearsay, even though if it's hearsay, he say, she say. Sorry. So what happens is that it is the police's job to do the investigation. So let the police do the investigation. And then last but not least, this is Awam. So our address is in C Park. We can follow us on our social media. At any point that you need any support, do get in touch with us. So, yep. Sorry, that was just a quick one on what we do and how can we support each other.
All right. Thank you very much, Charlene and Mena. It was such an insightful session. So I hope we all can put this into good use and make the world a better and a safer place for us, regardless whether you're regardless of genders. All right. Thank you. It's great having you here. Hoping to see you guys again. All right, so we have now progressed towards the end of today's event. So to wrap it up, we shall have our last performance from an all-girl Malaysian indie pop band that was established in 2018, the Senja. Let's welcome Kase, Myra, and Inara from Senja. Please introduce yourself.
Hello.
Hello, girls.
Oh, hey.
Introduce yourself.
We
are
the
candy kid.
Anyway,
We hope you enjoy the show.
Okay. We're Senja and we're gonna play songs for you. Please let us know if you can hear us. Can you stand there? Oh.
Hello.
Okay, so boyfriend how? Boyfriend how?
Just normal.
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 What's the first song? Kambing hitam.
What?
Boyfriend.
I love you, baby, Now listen, I'll take you all maybe. But sometimes I lose track of which one of the boys, which one of the boys am I supposed to sneak out tonight? Give it up for Ian Fun. Yay, thank you.
Yes, we are doing the next song.
I want to apologize. My bottom lip is it's swollen, so I can't sing properly. Hope you enjoy.
Because his new name is no longer Miss Piggy, it's Miss Lippy.
Thank you, everybody. Please enjoy this version of Black Sheep with got lips, I guess. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Hello again, friend of friends. I knew you were. I'll come and go, was waiting for the world to wait. Now that the truth is just a rule that you can find. You track the world, shape shift and hurt. Go past the gate. Every time it's
Wow.
Yay, wow, thank you everybody.
Oh wait, we can
That was great. That was great. Love the vibes. Great energy. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us tonight. We love y'all.
Thanks. Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of this event. Just to remind you once again, our session was recorded and you will be able to access to our Facebook page, Time to Talk.
My name is Danya and I was accompanied by Abiha today. On behalf of the committee, thank you so much to our honorable speakers and thank you everyone for attending our Time to Talk event on Unveiling the Taboo of Sex Education 2020. By the way, we're actually selling our official merchandise, a tote bag for 25 ringgit, where 5 ringgit of each purchase will be donated to Tenaganita, an NGO that provides shelters for both women and child survivors or human trafficking. So DM us on Instagram at TimeToTalk.official to grab your piece. So with that being said, wherever you are, stay safe and have a great rest of your night. Goodbye.